Chapter 75. It was a spacious courtyard house with a history of 100 years. The ancient walls were engraved with the marks of time. The courtyard house was very large and gave people a retro feeling. There were a lot of potted plants in the courtyard, and the air was filled with the fragrance of plants. Yixian sat upright in a pavilion. Beside him were Ling Long and Tai Li, who were on his left and right. "Mr. Yi, you told Master Azure Dragon not to investigate this matter. How can we find the culprit?" Ling Long asked carefully. "Have you heard of the saying, guilty conscience?" Yixian smiled. Looking at Yixian's smiling face, Ling Long seemed to understand something. She carefully probed. "What you mean is that the culprit knows you're in the capital. Even if you don't look for him, he'll be worried and won't just sit there and wait for death. He'll definitely expose his tracks?" "That's right. Since this person wants me dead, he must hate me to the core. As long as I'm in the capital, he'll have to live in torment every day. This torment will make him unable to sleep at night. Naturally, he'll do some stupid things." Yixian chuckled. "Brilliant, brilliant. Mr. Yi, your wisdom is as vast as the sea. Truly brilliant." Tai Li licked his face and flattered him. However, the words spoken by a boor like him instantly caused the atmosphere to become awkward. Yixian felt suffocated as he helplessly glanced at Tai Li, but didn't say anything. Big brother Tai stopped talking. Ling Long covered her forehead. Her face was a little red. She obviously felt a little embarrassed. "This is the Extreming Heart Sutra. It's a body training method that I created in the past 2 days. If you cultivate according to this method, it'll naturally solve the problem of your soul." Yixian took out a book and handed it to Ling Long. This made her happy and she kept thanking Yixian. "Mr. Yi, you're not joking, right? Master Poison is a saint in the medical world. Even he couldn't cure Ling Long's illness. You just took out a secret book. How can this cure Ling Long?" Tai Li didn't know how to keep his mouth shut. He just said whatever was on his mind. "Big brother Tai." Ling Long was furious. Ling Long was furious and was about to scold Tai Li, but before she could finish speaking, Yixian waved his hand and interrupted her. "Ling Long's soul is powerful. Even if she cultivates for dozens of years, her body won't be able to withstand her powerful soul. And this Extreming Heart Sutra is compatible with her physique. 1 year of her cultivation is equivalent to 10 years of ordinary cultivation. When she steps into the Xiantian realm, the hidden dangers in her body will disappear without a trace." As Yixian spoke up to hear, his eyes were deep as he looked at Ling Long and continued, "Moreover, once you step into the Xiantian realm, you will be an invincible existence within the same realm." Mr. Haha, that's great. Unfortunately, before Tai Li could finish his ecstatic words, Yixian's voice teased, "As long as you're not afraid of becoming a woman, you can cultivate this technique." Tai Li's wild laughter came to an abrupt end. He suddenly felt a chill in his crotch. His entire body shivered. Then he became silent, which also attracted Ling Long's laughter. Time passed very quickly. A week had passed since Yixian arrived in the capital. During this period of time, the capital could be said to be peaceful. Nothing major happened. Yixian was also very free. Every day he would give Ling Long some pointers. The rest of the time, he would stroll around the capital and look at some historical sites. It was a rare moment of leisure. However, the Yi family did not have it easy during this period of time. The members of the Wu and Bureau were constantly monitoring the Yi family's movements. From Yi Songhai and his son to the servants, everything they saw and what they ate turned into a large amount of information on Azure Dragon's desk. Pressure from all sides engulfed the Yi family. The military, politics, and business all suffered losses. If not for the fact that the Yi family was one of the 8 great families and the other families understood the principle of being intimately interdependent, the Yi family would have already collapsed under this pressure. During this period of time, the Yi family sent an invitation to Yixian, hoping to ease their relationship with Yixian. However, the so-called invitation was directly thrown away by Yixian. He did not even look at it. There were still 3 days before the Wu and Bureau's annual meeting. At the same time, Nangong Tian finally arrived at Mount Lang. Mount Lang. There was a clear lake with clear blue water. Occasionally, a few koi fish would jump out of the water, causing ripples to appear in the lake. A man in a white robe stood beside the lake with his hands behind his back. His hair was black, but his temples were silver. When he opened and closed his eyes, it was as if he had seen through everything in the world. He gave off a sense of tranquility and indifference. This man looked like a young man, but the aura he released from time to time made him seem like an old man in his twilight years. When this kind of contradictory feeling gathered on this person, it didn't give off a strange feeling, as if it was natural for him to do so. Junior Nangong Tian greets Senior Huantian. Nangong Tian's voice trembled as he knelt on the ground. The dozens of ancient martial artists behind him also knelt on the ground with reverence on their faces. They kept kowtowing to the man in front of them. Whoosh! His palm and fingers moved like the wind, creating a strange sound in the void. Before Nangong Tian could react, the heaven summoning token in his hand flew out and shot towards the man in front of him. Li Huantian was in a daze as he held the wooden token in his hand. He closed his eyes slightly and exerted force with his palm and fingers. Instantly, the wooden token turned into wood powder and flew into the void. Who is Nangong Hua to you? Li Huantian's voice was hoarse, but it gave off a strong sense of oppression. Nangong Hua is my ancestor, and I'm the current master of the Nangong family. I didn't want to disturb your cultivation, but the Nangong family has encountered an unprecedented enemy, and we're about to be destroyed. I have no choice but to shamelessly ask you to come out. Nangong Tian touched the ground with his forehead and said in an extremely respectful voice, "There's no end to the heavenly Tao, and there's no hope for immortality. I didn't expect to be involved in the trivial matters of the mortal world when I'm about to die." Li Huantian sighed, and the aura around him suddenly became extremely terrifying. His innate gang qi exploded in the void, and his murderous and desolate aura spread out at this moment. Fine, fine. The promise of the past has to be fulfilled. Let me, Li Huantian, see what kind of up-and-coming talents will appear in the Central Plains 100 years later. We welcome Senior Huantian to come out. Nangong Tian trembled continuously, causing the ancient martial artists behind him to kowtow again. Flying snow. Clang, clang, clang. Li Huantian shouted in a deep voice. A blue stone in the middle of the pool suddenly burst into pieces. A cold sword light crossed the sky and shot toward Li Huantian. With the flying snow sword in hand, Li Huantian's aura suddenly changed. He seemed to have turned into an unsheathed sharp sword that would cut down any living being that stood in his way. Chapter 76. In the outskirts of the capital, at the headquarters of the Wuxia department. In the spacious parking lot, there were all sorts of luxurious and low-key cars parked there. Familiar names constantly alighted from the cars. They were all famous tycoons from all walks of life. During the annual meeting of the Wuxia department, they were all fighting to watch this grand event. What kind of existence was the Wuxia department? There was no area that they couldn't control. Whether it was facing the strong enemies of other countries or cleaning up the hidden dangers of the country, the Wuxia department was an extremely powerful organization in the upper class of society. The world was bustling for profit and the world was bustling for profit. Everyone had their own thoughts. If they could establish a relationship with the Wuxia department, it would be extremely beneficial for them. And to be able to attend the annual meeting of the Wuxia department was also an affirmation of their status. The 8 great families of the capital, the big shots of the military, the tycoons of the business world, the big shots of the political world. When these people greeted each other, everyone's faces revealed a smile. They even called out to their acquaintances and entered the Wuxia department headquarters together. A black car slowly drove into the parking lot. Tai Li was the first to open the car door and respectfully invited Yixian to get out. When Yixian appeared, the slightly noisy parking lot suddenly quieted down. All sorts of gazes were focused on Yixian. This person is Yixian? He's a guest of the Earth group? It can't be. Such a young man is in such a high position? Shu, lower your voice. I heard that this Mr. Yi killed many people from the Yi family. Even the big shots above seem to have an extremely complicated relationship with this person. Although their voices were very soft, they all fell into Yixian's ears. However, Yixian's expression was expressionless. How could he care about what these people thought? Mr. Yi, Lord Azure Dragon is waiting for you inside. Tai Li and Ling Long led the way in front, while Yixian slowly followed. Only when the three of them entered the headquarters of the Wusan department did these celebrities from all walks of life stop talking. At this moment, looking at Yixian's back, Yi Songhai and his son felt extremely complicated. In the midst of everyone's discussion, the father and son could be considered to have lost all face, but this also left them helpless. Humph, unfilial son. Yi Songhai snorted. Watch your mouth. No matter what, he's still your son. What kind of scandal is this if outsiders see it? Yi Songhai reprimanded. I understand, father. Yi Song sighed deeply. The headquarters of the Martial Security Department was full of technology. Here one could see the most advanced equipment, colorful scientific research instruments, researchers in white coats, and ancient martial arts ability users walking by from time to time. If someone who did not understand this place saw this scene, they might think that the Wuhan department was a research department and would not dare to believe that this place was a law enforcement department. Earth Group Martial Arts Practice Field. When Yixian stepped out of the elevator, he was greeted by a spacious venue. There were all sorts of weapons ranging from ancient cold weapons to modern weapons. It was a feast for the eyes. The sound of fists and feet dancing could be heard. Every member of the Earth team was cultivating themselves. It could be said that it was extremely lively. Alright, everyone take a break. Come and meet our Earth Group guest. The Azure Dragon clapped his hands and told the members of the Earth team to stop cultivating. Under the lead of the Azure Dragon, they walked towards Yixian. Greetings, Mr. Yi. The arrival of Yixian caused the morale of the members of the Earth team to rise. Everyone's eyes were filled with reverence. Although they did not have much contact with Yixian, they had all heard of Yixian's deeds. Mr. Yi, what do you think of the cultivation of these team members? The Azure Dragon said proudly. Do you want me to tell the truth? Or do you want me to tell the truth? Yixian chuckled. Of course it's the truth. I still believe in your vision. You can speak your mind. These stinking brats, it's time to give them a blow. The Azure Dragon quickly said. Looking at the expectant gazes of the members of the Earth team, Yixian thought for a while and slowly said, in my opinion, your cultivation is very average, and your explosive power is insufficient. If you meet a true expert, I'm afraid you will suffer greatly. When Yixian finished speaking, the scene fell silent. Although the members of the Earth team did not refute him, their eyes were filled with unwillingness. One had to know that for them to be chosen to join the Martial Security Department, they all had a proud side in the field of ancient martial arts. However, Yixian had directly rejected them, which was undoubtedly a blow to their self-esteem. Humph! Suddenly, a cold snort was heard. A middle-aged man walked out from the crowd and looked at Yixian with a hint of hostility in his eyes. Guest Elder Yi, I think you are too arrogant. Our Earth team members have been through hundreds of battles, and we have carried out countless dangerous missions. They are the mainstays of the Earth team. Even if you are our guest elder, you cannot slander them like this. The middle-aged man said coldly. Instructor Chu is right. Although Mr. Ye's cultivation is strong and we can't compare to you, many villains have been captured by us. Many of our brothers have died in every mission. That's right. Although our cultivation is very weak in Mr. Ye's eyes, all of us are very hardworking and have never slacked off on our own cultivation. A middle-aged man took the lead and spoke out. Finally, a member of the Earth team began to refute Yixian. When the Azure Dragon saw this scene, his expression changed slightly, but he did not say anything. It was obvious that the Azure Dragon had seen how hard the members of the Earth team trained every day. Although he admired Yixian's cultivation, he did not believe Yixian's words on this matter. Alright, Instructor Chu, how can you talk to Mr. Yi like that? The Azure Dragon pretended to reprimand him. Group leader, I'm just talking about things. Chu Tianhe said proudly. Who was Yixian? He was an immortal cultivator, so his mind was very sensitive. How could he not see the current situation? Since the Azure Dragon and the others did not believe what he said, then there was no need for him to explain. But just as Yixian did not want to dwell on this matter, Chu Tianhe sneered again. It's rumored that Guest Elder Yi is a pre-celestial expert. I'm not talented, and my ancient martial arts cultivation is only at the Grandmaster realm. I've never seen a pre-celestial expert in my life, so I want to ask you for advice. Chu Tianhe's eager expression immediately caused the Azure Dragon's face to turn cold. He immediately reprimanded him. Instructor Chu, you are not a match for Mr. Yi. Why aren't you retreating? When did you become so unruly? Unfortunately, under the Azure Dragon's reprimand, Chu Tianhe only sneered as he looked at Yi Xian. His provocative expression was extremely obvious. Lord Azure Dragon, you've always said that Mr. Ye's cultivation is unfathomable. Since Mr. Yi is here today, why don't you show us your skills? Yeah, the other 7 team members are laughing at our Earth group. They said that Lord Azure Dragon found a young man to be a guest elder of the Earth group. They even said that Mr. Yi had connections with the higher-ups to sit in our Earth group's guest elder position. All sorts of comments appeared, and the members of the Earth group also started to jeer. This caused the Azure Dragon's face to darken, and he was about to reprimand them. Without waiting for the Azure Dragon to speak, Yi Xian looked at Chu Tianhe and said calmly, ever since I came here, you have been trying to target me. Although I don't know why, I can see the dissatisfaction in your eyes. That's right, I just can't accept you. What can you do? Chu Tianhe was very straightforward, and directly admitted to what Yi Xian said. Yi Xian laughed. He really laughed, but this kind of smile was slightly sinister, causing Chu Tianhe's heart to tighten. He looked at Yi Xian with a serious expression. I'm a very reasonable person. It's just that those who don't accept me are already dead. I wonder if you want to give it a try? Yi Xian said with a smile. Domineering and fierce like a mountain pressing down on people. The words humble and low-key could not be reflected on Yi Xian at all. Chapter 77. When Yi Xian finished speaking, the members of the Earth team burst into an uproar. They all started to jeer as they looked eagerly at Chu Tianhe. In fact, the reason why Chu Tianhe deliberately targeted Yi Xian was because the position of a guest elder had been empty for 10 years. This was also his goal for many years, but it was taken away by Yi Xian halfway. How could he be willing to accept this? Chu Tianhe also understood that for Yi Xian to be able to become a guest elder of the Earth team, his strength was definitely not an embroidered pillow. However, he also firmly believed that as an ancient martial arts master, even if he could not defeat Yi Xian, as long as he could fight to a draw with the other party, it would make Yi Xian lose a lot of face. Chu Tianhe's thoughts were very clear. No matter what the result was, he had earned enough face. This also caused him to laugh coldly and say, anyone can speak empty words. I hope guest elder you won't cry too miserably later. Chu Tianhe strode into the training field and turned his head to look at Yi Xian with a sinister smile on his face. Mr. Yi Xian, please show mercy. The Azure Dragon said anxiously, afraid that Yi Xian would take Chu Tianhe's life. What a pity. Yi Xian didn't respond in the slightest. He had a smile on his face the entire time. When he took a step forward, he suddenly appeared in front of Chu Tianhe, causing his expression to change. He continuously retreated, maintaining a safe distance from Yi Xian. Chu Tianhe did not see clearly how Yi Xian appeared in the arena. It was not only him who did not see clearly, but also the members of the Azure Dragon and the Earth team. However, Chu Tianhe unconsciously swallowed his saliva. Cold sweat appeared on his forehead, and his back was already drenched in sweat. Regret had already risen in his heart. As the old saying goes, one can see the whole leopard from a single spot. Chu Tianhe deeply understood that with the other party appearing in front of him without him noticing, if he were to directly attack him, he would definitely not be able to react in time. Mr. Yi, good movement technique. Chu Tianhe forced a laugh, but if one listened carefully, they would notice that his voice was trembling. Instructor Chu, do your best. Instructor Chu, let Mr. Yi see the strength of our Earth group. On the stage, the two of them stood facing each other. Below the stage, the members of the Earth group cheered for Chu Tianhe, and all sorts of excited shouts could be heard. Come. Yi Xian crooked his finger, a smile on his face the entire time. But this provocative action caused Chu Tianhe's face to turn red, and his eyes filled with shame and anger. You're courting death. Bang! Chu Tianhe was finally enraged. He abruptly exerted force on his feet, causing the ground paved with fine steel to crack. His iron palm swung through the air as he charged violently toward Yi Xian like a ferocious tiger descending the mountain. It's the great monument smashing hand. It's actually the Great Monument Smashing Hand. This is the martial skill that Instructor Chu is famous for. A member of the Earth team shouted in shock, his eyes filled with excitement. This Mr. Yixian is definitely going to lose. Instructor Chu's Great Monument Breaking Hand can crack rocks and break gold. Even if they're both ancient martial arts masters, very few people would dare to take Instructor Chu's attack head-on. Someone else spoke with certainty, as if they had already seen the scene of Yixian's defeat. Bang! Suddenly, a muffled sound rang out. When the scene on the stage appeared in front of everyone's eyes, their originally excited expressions completely disappeared. Their faces even turned sluggish. How is this possible? What kind of joke is this? After a few breaths of time, the members of the Earth team exclaimed loudly. They could not believe what they were seeing. On the stage, Yixian did not move. The smile on his face was the same as ever, but his sparkling and translucent jade-like palm was currently grabbing onto Chu Tianhe's neck, and was even lifting him into the air. Cluck cluck cluck. Chu Tianhe's face was purple, and crisp sounds kept coming from his throat. His four limbs were randomly kicking in the air, as if he was a weak chicken waiting to be slaughtered. TSK TSK TSK. Yixian slowly shook his head, a cold light flashing across his eyes. His voice was still calm as he said, "Too weak, you're really too weak? Let me go." I admit defeat," Chu Tianhe said with difficulty. He could completely feel how terrifying the power contained in the palm that was grabbing onto his neck was. If it was a moment later, he would definitely be strangled to death by the other party. His heart and guts were torn apart, and the invasion of life and death was what Chu Tianhe was feeling right now. Didn't I say that I'm a very reasonable person? Since you don't want to accept me, then you can only become a dead man. Yixian seemed to be talking about a very normal matter, but when it entered the ears of the crowd, it made their hair stand on end, as if they had fallen into the abyss of hell. "Mr. Yi, please show mercy." The Azure Dragon's face was pale as he spoke out anxiously. Bang! Yixian moved his palm and with a slap, he sent Chu Tianhe flying, and even caused the sound of bones breaking to ring out. A large amount of blood spurted out from Chu Tianhe's mouth, and his entire body spun 365 degrees in the air, and suddenly smashed into the stage. Puff! Blood stained the stage mixed with a few teeth. Chu Tianhe's body was constantly twitching, and the members of the Earth group who were watching this scene had already become deathly silent, as if their souls had left their bodies. Dong dong dong. Like raging waves crashing against the shore, like rocks piercing through the air, Yixian slowly walked forward until he arrived in front of Chu Tianhe. His wide feet suddenly stepped on Chu Tianhe's face, and he continued to crush it back and forth. "I'm a very reasonable person. I'll give you a chance now. As long as you say the word submit, I'll spare your life today," Yixian said calmly. At this moment, Chu Tianhe was so ashamed and furious that he was seriously injured. When he heard Yixian's words, his heart was about to explode from anger. He was the instructor of the Earth group, yet he had lost so much face today. However, Chu Tianhe knew very well that if he really said the word submit, he would lose a lot of prestige in front of the members of the Earth group. No, impossible. Chu Tianhe roared weakly, pretending to be a tough guy. As soon as Chu Tianhe finished speaking, he let out an extremely miserable cry of pain. Half of his head was suddenly stomped into the ground by Yixian, and a large amount of blood flowed out from his head. If Chu Tianhe was not an ancient martial arts grandmaster and had a strong physical body, Yixian's kick would have taken his life. In the face of so-called dignity and life, it seems that you have chosen dignity. Is it not good to live? Yixian made a strange sound and raised his foot again. His voice became extremely sinister as he continued. "Since you want to pretend to be a hero, I'll fulfill your wish." Chu Tianhe was truly afraid. He could feel that Yixian was not joking. He was afraid that he would really take his life in the next moment. Wang! Yixian narrowed his eyes. When his foot landed, an explosive sound came from the air, causing the members of the Earth group to cry out in alarm. It also caused the Azure Dragon's face to turn pale as he pleaded, "Mr. Yi, please spare his life." I submit." At this critical moment, Chu Tianhe finally cowered. His voice trembled as he begged for mercy. Large amounts of tears flowed out of his eyes. It was obvious that he was extremely humiliated. Chapter 78. A living ancient martial arts grandmaster directly cried out. When this scene fell into the eyes of the crowd, everyone's faces revealed complicated expressions. Yixian bullied people. He bullied people very much. It could be said that he bullied people to the extreme, and this was also the result he wanted. Yixian had always believed in one sentence. If a dog bites a person, the person will naturally not bite back. However, Yixian's method was to break the other party's dog leg and let the other party remember it for the rest of his life. The cold killing intent disappeared. Yixian bent down to help Chu Tianhe up, and even helped him tidy up his wrinkled clothes. He smiled and said, "Instructor Chu, I'm really sorry. Actually, I was just joking. Please don't blame me." Looking at Yixian's smiling face, Chu Tianhe's entire body tensed up. Even his teeth were unconsciously chattering. He looked at Yixian as if he was looking at a demon. His heart was filled with great fear. "No, it's fine." Chu Tianhe forced a laugh, but his smile was even uglier than crying. No wrong. Chu Tianhe was already crying. However, he really did not want to meet Yixian again because he was really afraid of Yixian. The person in front of him was temperamental and was simply a devil. Men, take Instructor Chu down to treat his injuries. Azure Dragon sighed and also had a member of the Earth team help Chu Tianhe to the infirmary. Yixian slowly walked down the stage, but the members of the Earth team unconsciously retreated. They looked at Yixian with a look of reverence that they had never seen before. Obviously, Yixian's methods had allowed them to truly experience what it meant to be a fiend. Looking at everyone's fearful expressions, Yixian's heart did not waver in the slightest. In fact, there was a huge reason why he did this. Establishing his might, that's right, establishing his might. Today, Chu Tianhe alone had dared to target him. If Yixian didn't strike like lightning and teach him a lesson, it was hard to guarantee that there would be others who would imitate Chu Tianhe and cause trouble for him in the future. Although Yixian wasn't afraid of people finding trouble with him, this kind of trivial matter would annoy him to no end. And the effect in front of him was very obvious. Yixian had already established a fierce character in front of the members of the Earth group. "Mr. Yi, I really admire you," Azure Dragon said with a bitter smile. "My methods were a little extreme, but it saved me a lot of trouble." "Don't blame me," Yixian said calmly. "Azure Dragon wouldn't dare to blame you, sir. It was Chu Tianhe who didn't know his place. He brought this upon himself," Azure Dragon said. The two of them chatted for a while before taking a seat and starting to talk about the Martial Security Bureau's annual meeting. Time passed very quickly. An hour later, Yixian also found out about the situation of the Earth group from the Azure Dragon. This also made the Azure Dragon look embarrassed, and he was a little embarrassed to face Yixian. "When the time comes, I will need Mr. Yi to make a move. Just don't hurt the other groups of guests." The Azure Dragon carefully probed. "It's fine, it's just a small matter," Yixian said calmly. While the two of them were talking, the surrounding members of the Earth group started to cultivate again. However, from time to time, they would peek at Yixian from the corner of their eyes filled with complicated emotions. In the ancient martial arts world, they believed that the strong were respected. Today, Yixian had made a move with lightning speed, allowing them to see what a true expert was. This also caused some people to have some thoughts in their hearts. Zhang Xiaochong was an ordinary member of the Earth group. His ancient martial arts cultivation was only at the early stage of the concealing strength. Although he trained hard every day, he was an extremely weak existence in the Earth group. He even had a shameful nickname, Zhang Xiao. Zhang Xiaochong's heart was currently in a dilemma. When he saw Yixian defeat Chu Tianhe in an instant, he was extremely afraid of Yixian. However, Zhang Xiaochong's heart was restless, because he had heard Yixian mention that their cultivation was average, and their explosive power was insufficient. This was also his greatest weakness in ancient martial arts cultivation. After hesitating for a long time, Zhang Xiaochong seemed to have a voice in his heart telling him that if he did not ask Yixian for guidance now, he would not know when he would be able to see this guest Yi again. If he did not seize this opportunity, he would probably regret it for the rest of his life. Zhang Xiaochong quickly made a decision, his face flushed red, but under the astonished gazes of the members of the Earth group, he walked towards Yixian with extreme determination. Yi. Mr. Yi. You just said that we don't have enough explosive power. Can you give this junior some pointers? Zhang Xiaochang's face flushed red. He did not dare to look into Yi Xian's eyes, his voice trembling slightly. He was obviously extremely nervous. Nonsense, I'm talking about business with Mr. Yi Yu. Without waiting for the Azure Dragon to finish speaking, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him, causing the Azure Dragon to be startled and swallow the words of reprimand in his mouth. You're not ashamed to ask. This is the potential that an expert should have. You're not bad. Yi Xian smiled and nodded, then stood up from his seat and walked towards an iron pillar. This also caused Zhang Xiaochang to suddenly raise his head, a look of gratitude appearing in his eyes, and he quickly followed behind Yi Xian. Such a scene naturally caused the members of the Earth group to scramble to watch, and there were even whispers of discussion. I didn't see it, but Zhang Xiaorui is so bold. He actually dares to disturb Yi Xian? What do you know? Xiaorua has always been very hard-working in his cultivation, but he hasn't made any progress. He's also taking a risk. If you ask me, Xiaorua is doing something unnecessary. The path of cultivation is a step-by-step process. Even if this Mr. Ye's cultivation is terrifying, how much can he improve in terms of martial arts? All sorts of discussions rang out. At this moment, Zhang Xiaochang's face was flushed red, so he naturally heard it. However, the determination in his eyes did not change in the slightest. An iron pillar was made of fine iron, so its hardness was naturally extraordinary. Use your greatest strength to strike this iron pillar. Yi Xian turned around and looked at Zhang Xiaochang. Yes, Mr. Yi. Zhang Xiaochang focused his mind and calmed his qi, ignoring the discussions of the people around him. After a dozen breaths, he felt that he was already at his peak state, and directly clenched his fist and punched the iron pillar. Bang! With a muffled sound, the iron pillar swayed slightly and emitted a buzzing sound. Not even a trace of a fist mark was left behind, causing Zhang Xiaochang to lower his head in shame. The foot is the root of the earth, the body must be as immovable as a mountain, the spine must be like a dragon, and the blood energy must be like the ocean. With the belt as the hip, with the hip as the arm, with the arm as the fist, condensing the blood energy in the entire body into one point. It was as if the morning bell and evening drum were ringing, as if the light of dawn was attacking. When Yi Xian's voice sounded out, Zhang Xiaochang's face froze, and a confused look appeared in his eyes, as if he had fallen into deep thought. After a full 10 minutes, Zhang Xiaochang's body did not move, and the surrounding members of the Earth group had looks of contempt in their eyes, as if they were about to disperse. Ha! Suddenly, Zhang Xiaochang opened his eyes, and a ray of light flashed across his eyes. With an explosive sound from his mouth, he once again turned his palm into a fist, and the fist light was like a resplendent meteor, violently smashing towards the iron pillar in front of him. Dong! When the fist and iron collided, there was no strange sound. Just as everyone helplessly shook their heads and was about to disperse, an extremely soft and crisp sound came from the iron pillar, causing the surrounding members of the Earth group to widen their eyes as they looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief. The iron pillar made of fine iron was cracking like a spider web, and a large number of iron pieces continued to fall to the ground, until a loud bang rang out, and the iron pillar suddenly exploded into pieces. The dazzling iron stars scattered on the ground, as if they were about to pierce one's eyes to the point that one could not open one's eyes. Silence, silence, a deathly silence. The entire Earth group martial arts practice field was completely silent. After a full 10 breaths of time, the dumbstruck members of the Earth group all burst into an uproar. They even rushed over to Zhang Xiaochang's side and continuously touched his body, as if they were looking at a rare treasure. Xiaoru. No. Xiaochang. Did you really do this? A member of the Earth group asked in shock. This? How is this possible? Xiaochang is only at the dark stage, how could he break the iron pillar? All sorts of clamorous discussions could be heard, and Zhang Xiaochang also stared blankly at the scattered pieces of iron on the ground. He kept stroking his palm, as if he had fallen into a daze. Yi, Mr. Yi. Thank you. Zhang Xiaochang finally woke up from his daze, and tears of joy flowed out of his eyes. He directly knelt in front of Yi Xian, and continuously kowtowed to thank him. This also caused them to look at Yi Xian with an extremely warm expression. There were even some who were ready to move, wanting to go up and ask Yixian to give them some pointers. Unfortunately, before the members of the Earth group could arrive in front of Yixian, the Azure Dragon strode over and waved them away. Then he looked at the iron pieces on the ground in shock, and bowed to Yixian. Mr. Yi, previously the Azure Dragon was ignorant. Now I apologize to you. Chapter 79. It's fine, you don't have to be like this. Yixian smiled. Seeing that Yixian had no intention of blaming him, the Azure Dragon finally relaxed. He then scolded Zhang Xiaochang with a smile, "Brat, hurry up and get up. Mr. Yi doesn't like kowtowing bugs." Zhang Xiaochang quickly stood up, his expression extremely excited, and looked at Yixian with a gaze of worship. It was no wonder that Zhang Xiaochang was so excited. He had been ridiculed in the Earth group for the past few years, but today, under Yixian's guidance, he finally felt proud and elated, and even saw the bright path ahead of him. The Azure Dragon instructed Zhang Xiaochang to cultivate well, and not let down Yixian's kindness in guiding him. This also made Zhang Xiaochang nod his head repeatedly, once again thanking Yixian. Then, under the envious gazes of the members of the Earth group, he entered the martial arts arena to cultivate. "Mr. Yi, I have a presumptuous request. I hope you can agree to it." When Yixian and Yixian sat down again, the Azure Dragon looked at Yixian with hope in his eyes and said, without needing the Azure Dragon to say anything, Yixian already knew what the other party wanted to say. It was obvious that the Azure Dragon had seen the change in Zhang Xiaochang, and wanted to ask Yixian to help him teach the members of the Earth group. "There's no need to personally teach them. I will write a cultivation guide for you. I believe they will also make great progress," Yixian said softly. The Azure Dragon also knew that his request was somewhat difficult to fulfill, but to be able to achieve such a result made him very excited. Naturally, he did not dare to force Yixian to personally teach the members of the Earth group. "Haha, Brother Azure Dragon, I heard that your Earth group finally has a guest elder. Can you introduce me to him?" Suddenly, a loud laugh came from afar as a few people walked out of the elevator. The person in the lead was a middle-aged man with a sinister face and a pair of inverted triangular eyes that were slightly narrowed, giving off a feeling that he was not a good person. The Azure Dragon's face turned cold as he said in a gloomy voice, "Mr. Yi, I forgot to tell you that the Wu Jun you killed back then was actually this person's sworn brother. This person's name is White Wolf, and he is the leader of the Xian group. His ice ability has already stepped into the A realm." Yixian's expression remained the same when he heard the introduction of the Azure Dragon. He finally understood why Wu Jun was able to run rampant in Jiangnan City for so many years even though he was only at the dark stage. It seemed like it was also because of this person's support. Every year, Wu Jun would give a lot of money to the White Wolf. The two of them seemed to be sworn brothers, but in reality, Wu Jun was just a tool for the White Wolf to amass wealth. Although it was a tool, the fact that Wu Jun was killed by Yixian naturally caused White Wolf to burn with rage. However, the orders from above made it difficult for White Wolf to openly cause trouble for Yixian. Furthermore, Yixian had become a guest of the Earth group, which made White Wolf remember Yixian even more. "This must be Mr. Yi, right?" White Wolf brought a group of subordinates to Yixian. The smile on his face was extremely warm, and he even extended his right hand. It seemed like he wanted to shake hands with Yixian. Unfortunately, Yixian did not move, and looked at White Wolf indifferently. This also caused him to be startled, and a trace of killing intent flashed across his eyes. He then quietly retracted his right hand, and there was no awkwardness on his face. "Let me introduce myself. I am the leader of the Xian group, White Wolf. I have long heard of Mr. Ye's great name." A subordinate quickly brought over a chair. White Wolf directly sat opposite Yixian as if there was no one else around. A sinister smile appeared on his face. Bang! The Azure Dragon slammed the table and stood up. His voice was ice-cold as he said, "White Wolf, this is my Earth group's martial arts practice field." Haha! White Wolf shook his head and laughed. He kept slamming the table as if he had heard a very funny joke. Suddenly, his pair of inverted triangular eyes slowly narrowed as he looked at Yixian like a venomous snake. He said, "Yixian, I know you have some connections with the higher-ups, but you have to know that Wuxia is not as simple as you think. If you want to gain a foothold in Wuxia, have you asked me, White Wolf? Ta! The sound of hurried footsteps came from all directions. The members of the Earth Group had all gathered behind Azure Dragon and Yixian. The way they looked at White Wolf and the others was even more hostile. As for the subordinates behind White Wolf, their eyes were wide open. Their auras were not inferior to the members of the Earth Group. It was as if the two sides were about to fight in the next moment. White Wolf, looks like the martial arts competition hasn't even started yet. And you can't wait to fight with me? Azure Dragon sneered again and again. His clothes fluttered in the wind as he looked at White Wolf with a cold gaze. TSK TSK TSK. With a smile on his face, he looked at Azure Dragon and the others and said, Lord Azure Dragon's martial arts cultivation is naturally extraordinary. I do not dare to fight with you. What a pity all of your subordinates are trash. In my opinion, after the martial arts competition ends, you should tell the higher-ups that the Earth Group should be disbanded. At that time, Lord Azure Dragon will come to my Xian Group. Although you can't be the team leader anymore, you can still be my assistant. Ridicule, provocation, arrogance. This was the attitude displayed by the White Wolf. This also caused the Azure Dragon's expression to turn extremely cold. The members of the Earth Group behind him were even more furious. They couldn't wait to attack right now and teach the White Wolf a lesson. Azure Dragon was not a person who was good at words. At this moment, his chest was about to explode from anger. When he clenched his fists, crackling sounds could be heard, as if he was about to attack White Wolf in the next moment. Looking at Azure Dragon's furious expression, White Wolf laughed sinisterly. He also knew what it meant to stop before going too far. If the two sides really fought here, he wouldn't be able to explain it to the higher-ups. The Earth Group is trash and even the guest is trash. You can rest assured that when the martial arts competition begins, my Xian Group will naturally show mercy. Haha. White Wolf laughed loudly and stood up. He called out to the members of the Xian Group and walked towards the elevator. From the beginning to the end, Yi Xian's expression was calm. He did not express any opinion, and no one could tell what he was thinking. Mr. Yi, this White Wolf insulted you and our Earth Group so much, why don't you teach him a lesson? Some of the members of the Earth Group were furious. Could it be that their guest was really a coward? A smile appeared on the corner of Yi Xian's mouth, and his calm voice also came out from Yi Xian's mouth. He's just a dead man, why should I lower myself to his level? White Wolf, who had already walked to the elevator, stopped in his tracks when he heard Yi Xian's words. He even turned his head to look at Yi Xian, then smiled sinisterly. I've seen many shameless people, but they've all become dead people. Don't disappoint me. You will die miserably, I promise. Yi Xian smiled, as if he was talking about something very casual. Chapter 80. Humph! The White Wolf snorted coldly and finally left with the members of the Xian Group. However, in the elevator, the sinister look in the White Wolf's eyes was abnormally intense. Inform guest Elder Lian and tell him that although there are people above this Yi Xian and it's not easy to kill him, it's still possible to cripple him, right? The White Wolf sneered sinisterly. Earth Group Martial Arts Practice Field. The members of the ground were furious, and the Azure Dragon's expression was extremely unsightly. Only Yi Xian remained calm. From time to time, he would sip the tea in his cup, feeling relaxed. It's just a clown, yet it caused your emotions to surge. You guys have disappointed me too much. Yi Xian slowly shook his head. He then turned to look at the members of the Earth Group and said, Mr. Yi is right, this person is just a clown. As long as you guys do your best in the martial competition, you will definitely not lose to the members of the Xian Group. That's right. Although our Earth Group is at the bottom every year, their Xian Group might not be much stronger than us. When the time comes, we'll show them some power. Yes, we want to beat these dogs to death. The members of the Earth Group all spoke out. With anger in their hearts, they once again began to seriously cultivate. Looking at the figures of the members of the Earth Group, a trace of worry flashed across the Azure Dragon's eyes. As the leader of the Earth Group, how could he not know the standards of these members? According to the overall strength of the members of the Earth Group, they were indeed weaker than the members of the Xian Group. This was also the reason why the White Wolf was so arrogant. Yi Xian seemed to have seen through the Azure Dragon's worries. This also made Yi Xian pat the Azure Dragon's shoulder and say, Don't worry, send Zhang Xiaochang to participate in this martial competition. He should be able to win glory for the Earth Group. Mr. Yi, you might not know this, but the members of the various groups that can participate in the martial competition are all at the transforming strength stage, and some of them are only one step away from stepping into the Grandmaster realm. Although Zhang Xiaochang has received your guidance, he is still only at the dark strength stage. How can he go on stage? The Azure Dragon said worriedly. Cultivation doesn't represent strength. You can send him out without worry. Yi Xian did not explain too much, but the confidence he exuded made Azure Dragon secretly shocked. He could only follow Yi Xian's instructions and arrange for Zhang Xiaochang to be on the martial arts competitions list. Lord Azure Dragon, the annual meeting is about to begin. The director wants me to inform you that you can enter the venue. Not long after, a young woman arrived and informed the ground team to hurry to the venue. Mr. Yi, let's go. The Azure Dragon and Yi Xian walked side by side. The members of the Earth Group followed behind them and headed straight for the venue. At the same time in the capital, dozens of military vehicles cleared the way in front, and dozens of luxurious vehicles that were worth tens of millions of dollars followed them. Such a luxurious scene made the citizens of Jingdo stop to watch. They wondered which big shot had set out on a trip to arrange such a scene. The extended Rolls-Royce Phantom was a limited edition of 5 models in the world. Surrounded by many luxury cars, it slowly drove toward the headquarters of the Wu-En department. In the car, a flying snow sword was placed horizontally on Li Huantian's knees. Li Huantian's face was expressionless as if he was resting with his eyes closed. Nangong Tian's face was flushed red, and his body was trembling uncontrollably. He glanced at Li Huantian from the corner of his eyes from time to time with extreme respect in his eyes. Ever since he found Li Huantian, a series of twists and turns had made Nangong Tian realize how terrifying Li Huantian was. His range of influence was even greater. A heaven summoning token was sent directly to the ancient martial arts families. It immediately caused a huge earthquake in the ancient martial arts world. Countless ancient martial arts families rushed to Jingdo, wanting to meet the 9th expert in the world from 100 years ago. The 9th expert in the world, Li Huantian, was a legendary figure. He was also the existence at the peak of the ancient martial arts world. Although Li Huantian had not appeared in the world for 100 years, the legends that he left behind in the ancient martial arts world were still talked about enthusiastically. Nangong Tian was very excited and emotional. The arrival of these ancient martial arts families would naturally strengthen the reputation of the Nangong family. Furthermore, Anta had agreed to join forces with him to kill Yi Xian. Although the Xia country found out about this and the Nangong family no longer had a foothold in the Xia country, he had already made preparations. As long as he killed Yi Xian, he would leave the Xia country with his family. Furthermore, Nangong Tian firmly believed that Li Huantian, who was beside him, would be able to kill Yi Xian without Anta's help. Everything was ready. Although Nangong Tian was extremely confident, he still made preparations just in case. Yi Xian, it's time for you to die. Nangong Tian muttered to himself with extreme hatred. There was an extremely cruel look in his eyes. At the annual meeting at the headquarters of the Wuan Agency, the venue was packed with people. There were more than 10 arenas, and the seats were filled with celebrities from all walks of life. The members of the 8 teams of the Wuan Agency entered the resting area one after another, waiting for the annual meeting to begin. At the resting area of the Earth team, Azure Dragon and Yi Xian sat side by side. The members of the Earth team behind them looked excited. It was obvious that some of them would be competing soon. While waiting for the annual meeting to begin, Azure Dragon also introduced the situation of the Wuan Agency to Yi Xian in detail. The Wuan Agency was divided into 8 teams: Heaven, Earth, Black, Yellow, and Universe. The Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow teams dealt with various matters in the Xia country. They were also the 4 teams with the most members. The Universe, Black, and Yellow teams were extremely mysterious. Their abilities were also extremely complicated. Even Azure Dragon didn't know much about them. However, there were very few members in the 4 teams. The Desolate team had the fewest members, and there were only 4 of them, including the team leader. In terms of strength, the strongest was the U group. Although there were only 8 members, each of them was a master-level character. There were even rumors that the Yu group's Lord Tianyu was a Xiantian master. But this rumor had never been confirmed. As for the so-called martial arts competition, if it was said to be a competition between the 8 teams, it would be more accurate to say that the Heaven, Earth, Black, and Yellow teams were competing for rankings. The Universe, Black, and Yellow teams wouldn't send anyone to compete at all. The rankings of the Universe, Black, and Yellow teams had never changed. They were also high and mighty existences. Although there weren't many people in these 4 teams, none of them were simple. As Azure Dragon explained the situation of the Wuan agency in detail, Yixian slowly nodded. However, his expression was calm, and it was obvious that there was no fluctuation in his heart. It was also at this moment that a deep gaze landed on Yixian, causing him to look for the owner of the gaze. Yu team's resting area. When Yixian and Tianyu's gazes met, Tianyu smiled and nodded towards Yixian. Then he shifted his gaze away. His expression was very calm, as if he had only casually glanced at Yixian. He didn't show any strange emotions, but a hint of surprise flashed across Tianyu's eyes. A little interesting. Yixian's cultivation was so terrifying that he could see through Tianyu's cultivation with a single glance. This also caused a playful expression to appear in his eyes. He had developed a strong interest in this Yu team leader. Yixian retracted his gaze and looked towards the rest of the 6 teams, hoping to find something that would interest him. The Black team's White Wolf sneered. He directly made a throat-slitting gesture towards Yixian. His actions were extremely provocative. Team leader Huang Zhu was a burly man with a rough body. He only had a master-level cultivation. He cupped his fists towards Yixian from afar, which could be considered a greeting. The Heaven team leader was a youth with icy blue hair. He emitted an aura that kept people away. He only glanced at Yixian, and didn't have any intention of greeting him. The Universe team leader was a weathered old man. He smiled and nodded towards Yixian. The Hong team leader was a middle-aged man. He had a head of fiery red hair that was like a raging flame. He gave off an extremely violent aura. When Yixian looked towards the Desolate team leader, a look of astonishment flashed across his eyes. He suddenly stood up and released his divine sense, attacking the Desolate team leader. The Desolate team leader was the only woman. She wore a long white dress and looked elegant and dignified. She gave off the feeling of a pretty girl from a humble family, but she didn't lose her elegant temperament. At this moment, Yixian's sudden action naturally attracted the attention of many people. When they realized that Yixian was staring at the Desolate team leader, a mocking look appeared in their eyes. As the Desolate team leader, Shueji naturally felt that Yixian was acting strangely. She only frowned slightly and glanced at Yixian indifferently. A cold look appeared in her eyes. Clearly, she felt that Yixian's gaze was very unreasonable. Interesting, really interesting. I didn't expect that such a thing would appear in this world. Yixian retracted his divine sense. His voice was extremely unpredictable. Mr. Yi, what are you talking about? Please don't do anything rash. Lord Shueji is not to be trifled with, Azure Dragon hurriedly said, afraid that Yixian would do something unreasonable. Chapter 81. Logically speaking, Yixian was not a lecherous person. Azure Dragon was very sure of this. However, when Yixian walked towards Shueji, Azure Dragon's heart began to waver. Gentle as jade with a warm smile. This was the attitude that Yixian displayed. When he arrived at the Desolate group's resting area and stood in front of Shueji, Shueji's expression turned ugly. Hello, my name is Yixian. May I know if we can get to know each other? Yixian's gaze was strange, and the smile on his face was unfathomable. Unfortunately, Yixian's greeting was ignored by the leader of the Desolate group. Her delicate face did not change at all, as if Yixian was air. Heh. A soft laugh came from Yixian's mouth. Under everyone's astonished gazes, Yixian actually sat directly next to Shueji. This caused the woman's expression to turn cold, and she looked at Yixian with disgust. I'm very curious. Logically speaking, this world is in the age of chaos. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth does not exist in this world, and the rules of the Great Path are untraceable. Even immortal cultivators cannot survive in this world. However, why do demons still exist in this world? I wonder if Lord Shueji can explain this to me? Yi Xian stared at the woman in front of him as he spoke. His voice was extremely playful. Boom! It was as if thunder from the ninth heaven had exploded, and it was as if the waves of the vast ocean had come crashing down. When Shuejia heard Yi Xian's words, panic instantly appeared on her originally unhappy face. Her fair and tender face became even paler, and she looked at Yi Xian with an extremely shocked expression. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Shueji's voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzzing. However, if one listened carefully, one would notice that her voice was trembling. Yi Xian got up from his seat and patted Shueji's shoulder affectionately. He said in a strange voice, "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. I'll look for you after this annual meeting." Yi Xian was still smiling, but it made Shueji feel cold all over. She looked at Yi Xian's back as he left, and there was a trace of panic in her eyes. She lowered her head, and no one knew what she was thinking. How dare this guy make a move on Lady Shueji? Don't talk nonsense. Didn't you see that Lady Shueji didn't get angry? Maybe they already knew each other? Lady Shueji is a famous ice goddess. In my opinion, these two people might be lovers. Do you want to die? If these words were heard by Lord Mingyi of the Heavenly Team, he would definitely teach you a lesson. In Group 8's resting area, all sorts of discussions could be heard. The group leaders all focused their gazes on Yi Xian. Everyone looked at Yi Xian with different gazes. Humph! White Wolf snorted coldly. This brat has guts. He actually dared to provoke Shueji. It seems that Mingyi won't let him off even without us making a move. Interesting. It seems that this annual meeting will be very interesting. Tianyu took a deep look at Yi Xian as a strange look flashed across his eyes. In the Heavenly Team's resting area, Mingye's face was gloomy. He looked at Yi Xian with great hostility. In the Earth Team's resting area, when Yi Xian returned, Azure Dragon's face was filled with bitterness. He didn't know what to say to Yi Xian. "Mr. Yi, what are you?" Azure Dragon finally asked. "This Shueji is very interesting. It seems that this world isn't that boring. Don't you think so, Azure Dragon?" "Ha." Yi Xian smiled mysteriously, causing Azure Dragon to be confused. He didn't know what Yi Xian was talking about. Clang! The sound of gongs and drums resounded throughout the venue, causing everyone to retract their gazes from Yi Xian and look at the center of the venue. A high platform rose from the center of the venue. The Secretary of Martial Security was dressed in formal attire. He first bowed to the guests from all directions, then slowly recited the opening speech. Boring and long-winded. This was Yi Xian's feeling. The opening speech of the Secretary of Martial Security lasted for more than 20 minutes. It was nothing more than the past year, the results of the Martial Security Department, and the encouragement of the members of each group. Perhaps sensing the impatience of the crowd, the Secretary of Martial Security smiled and directly announced the start of the martial arts competition. Only then did the venue become noisy. Group 1 Zhang Ming of Group Yellow versus He Huan of Group Black. Please come to the stage to compete. When the referee's voice sounded, the two groups of contestants quickly went up the stage. The two fighters on the stage were locked in a fierce battle, which attracted cheers from all directions. At this moment, Yi Xian lazily leaned back in his chair and looked at the competition below in boredom. To Yi Xian, these two people's martial arts were like children playing around. How could they arouse his interest? Group Black wins. When the first match ended and the referee announced the result, White Wolf's face was filled with pride. He even laughed loudly at Yi Xian. "Guest Elder Yi, if the members of our two groups meet, I will definitely instruct them to show mercy. However, when the time comes for you to go on stage, don't embarrass the Earth group." Haha. White Wolf's provocative actions caused Azure Dragon's face to darken, and it even caused the members of the other groups to burst into laughter. It was obvious that the Earth group's ranking every year was obvious to all, and although Yi Xian's reputation was great, no one had seen him fight before. Naturally, no one thought highly of Yi Xian. Group 2 Earth Group Zhang Xiaochong versus Heaven Group Li Fenglan. When the referee's voice sounded, Zhang Xiaochong's face was pale, and he looked uneasy. It was obvious that this was his first time participating in such a grand event. How could he not be nervous? As a man you can lose but you can't cry. Fight with all your might and prove yourself. When Zhang Xiaochang nervously entered the arena, Yi Xian's voice sounded out at the right time. Mr. Yi, I won't let you down. Zhang Xiaochang's face froze, then he clenched his fists tightly, a determined look in his eyes, and strode towards the stage. On the stage, Li Fenglan was a young woman. Although she was not very good-looking, she gave off a heroic aura. Her cultivation was also at the strength transformation stage, but when she found out that her opponent was Zhang Xiaochang of the Earth Group, her originally excited emotions gradually cooled down. There was no other reason. The Earth Group was weak to begin with, and Zhang Xiaochang was famous for being trash. Competing with such a person was just a formality, and even if she won, she would not feel the slightest bit proud. Are you going to admit defeat? Or do you want me to throw you off the stage? Li Fenglan said coldly. Mr. Yi once taught me that as a man, I will not lower my head to a woman. Either you kill me today, or I will not admit defeat. Zhang Xiaochang's face was red, but he still roared out loud. Mr. Yi. That Mr. Yi who relied on his connections to become a guest of the Earth Group? What kind of good things can a person like him teach you? Li Fenglan sneered, the contempt in her eyes becoming even stronger. You're not allowed to slander Mr. Yi. Zhang Xiaochang's face flushed red. He was like a crazed beast as he directly attacked Li Fenglan. Chapter 82. Bang! When the fist and palm collided, Li Fenglan did not seem to make any movements. She only turned her body slightly, and when she struck out with her palm, she directly sent Zhang Xiaochang flying, causing Zhang Xiaochang's body to crash into the stage. You're really weak. Is this the result of Mr. Ye's teachings? Li Fenglan sneered, then looked at the referee and said, He's not my match at all. I request for someone else to do it again. Haha. When this scene appeared, a large amount of mocking laughter came from the venue. In the Earth Group's resting area, the Azure Dragon's expression was extremely ugly. On the other hand, Yi Xian's face was expressionless. He had a leisurely look on his face, as if he did not care about the ridicule at all. Xiaochang, how did I teach you? Suddenly, Yi Xian's calm voice sounded in the venue, directly suppressing all the mocking laughter. When such a thing happened, everyone was stunned, and the laughter in their mouths stopped abruptly. Swallowing thunder sound? Looks like I underestimated him. The leader of the Heaven Group, Ming Yi, said in a deep voice. He looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. Not only Ming Yi, but the other group leaders were all people with high cultivations. Just a single word from Yi Xian was enough to suppress the laughter in the entire arena. It was obvious that this Earth Group guest Elder Yi was not an ordinary person. On the stage, a stream of blood continuously flowed out from the corner of Zhang Xiaochang's mouth. Under the astonished gazes of the entire arena, Zhang Xiaochang's arm supported himself on the ground, and he finally stood up slowly. His pair of bright eyes seemed to be glowing, giving off an extremely unyielding feeling. What a strong fighting spirit! The leader of the Universe Group said with shining eyes. The feet are the root of the earth, the body must be as immovable as a mountain, the spine must be like a dragon, the blood energy must be like the ocean, the belt must be the hip must be the arm must be the fist, the blood energy must be condensed into one point, and when a punch is thrown out, one must have the belief of invincibility. The feet are the root of the earth, the body must be as immovable as a mountain. Zhang Xiaochang's mouth continuously made murmuring sounds, as if he had fallen into an unknown state, causing everyone to look at him in surprise. What are you talking about? You've already lost and you still want to embarrass yourself here? Do you want me to personally throw you down? Li Fenglan frowned slightly and said in a dissatisfied voice, Fight! All of a sudden, Zhang Xiaochang suddenly raised his head, and when his eyes opened and closed, a bright light appeared. A thunderous roar came out of his mouth, and the blood qi in his body surged like a vast ocean, gathering towards his right fist. Boom! Zhang Xiaochang punched out like a meteor, and the air exploded. Zhang Xiaochang instantly appeared in front of Li Fenglan, and under Li Fenglan's shocked gaze, he quickly raised his palm and collided with Zhang Xiaochang's. Crack! The sound of bones cracking could be heard. Li Fenglan's palm was twisted irregularly, and a painful cry came from Li Fenglan's mouth. However, this was not the end. Zhang Xiaochang's fist did not slow down and violently bombarded Li Fenglan's chest. Immediately, her sternum caved in, and a large amount of blood spurted out from her mouth. She flew back over 10 meters and instantly fell out of the arena. She fell unconscious. Fenglan. Mingyi let out a low growl. When he leaped, he instantly appeared beside Li Fenglan and quickly fed her a medicinal pill. Then he checked her pulse, and his expression gradually darkened. What a ruthless method! You actually crippled her cultivation? Mingyi suddenly raised his head and looked angrily at Zhang Xiaochang in the arena. A terrifying murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and he strode toward the arena. Buzz! A cool breeze blew, and Yixian strangely appeared beside Zhang Xiaochang. He looked at Mingyi indifferently and said, "What do you want to do? Since you hurt my beloved disciple, I naturally have to use his life to pay for it." Mingyi's murderous intent was cold as he looked directly at Yixian. "You?" Yixian smiled slightly, then hooked his finger at Mingyi and said, "If you can hurt a single hair on his head, I'll consider it my loss." Arrogance, and disregard. This was the attitude that Yixian displayed. Although Zhang Xiaochang was not his disciple, this did not mean that Yixian could let Mingyi hurt him. When this scene fell into the eyes of the crowd, there was an uproar. They looked at Yixian with surprise in their eyes. Just how bold was this Earth Group guest elder? Did he not know that Mingyi was the leader of the Heaven Group and was at the peak of the Grandmaster stage? He was only one step away from stepping into the innate stage? Brat, no one has ever dared to speak to me like that. Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Mingyi strode onto the arena. The aura around him buzzed, as if a great battle was about to break out between the two of them. Mingyi, you don't have the qualifications to fight with Mr. Yi. You have to pass through me, the Azure Dragon. The Azure Dragon strode over and directly faced Mingyi. An extremely ruthless look appeared in his eyes. Azure Dragon, you've lost to me. This is none of your business. I advise you not to interfere. Mingyi was already dissatisfied with Yixian for flirting with Xueji. Now that Zhang Xiaochang had crippled Li Fenglan's cultivation, how could he tolerate this? Humph! Suddenly a cold snort was heard. An old man in his 60s flew over from the Heaven Group's resting area. His cultivation was also at the peak of the Grandmaster stage. He stood beside Mingyi and looked coldly at the Azure Dragon. Lord Azure Dragon, it seems that you have forgotten about this old man. Yunshan, huh? The Azure Dragon's expression was complicated because this person was a guest elder of the Heaven Group. His cultivation was only on par with Mingyi's. Swords were drawn and bows were on the verge of breaking out. Such a scene immediately caused the atmosphere of the entire assembly to become heavy. When White Wolf and the others saw this scene, their eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Stop! Before the two sides could make a move, the secretary of Wu En strode over with an extremely gloomy expression on his face. As the secretary of Wu En, although he only had a nominal position and the team leader of Group 8 did not take him seriously, he was still the nominal head of the Wu En department. Moreover, he was also the one presiding over this assembly. If something really went wrong, he would be the first to bear the brunt of the blame when the higher-ups blamed him. Although the secretary of Wu En had an extremely bad impression of Yixian, if the two sides really clashed as the secretary of Wu En, he would not be able to absolve himself from the blame. This is the Wu En department's annual meeting. It's not a place for you to settle your grudges. If you really want to make a move, then wait until the team leader's guest elder sparred. You can give it your all, the secretary of Wu En said sternly. Humph! Mingyi's eyes were cold as he said coldly, Yixian, guest elder Yi, you should be glad that this is the headquarters of the Wu En department. I won't argue with you now, but when we meet later, I hope your fate won't be too miserable. Let's go. Mingyi called out to Yun Shanhai and turned to walk towards the Heaven Group to rest. You really don't know your own limits. Yixian smiled indifferently, but it caused the Azure Dragon beside him to feel a chill in his heart. He knew that Yixian might have the intention to kill him. He was afraid that the Wu En department's annual meeting this time would undergo a huge change because of Yixian. Chapter 83. Mr. Yi, Zhang Xiaochang said in a slightly uneasy manner. Yixian patted Zhang Xiaochang's shoulder and said, Have a good competition. Don't think too much about other things. After comforting Zhang Xiaochang, Yi Xian and the Azure Dragon also returned to the Earth Group's resting area. Mr. Yi, no matter what, Ming Yi and the others are all members of the Wuan department. When the time comes, please show mercy. Others might not know Yi Xian's strength, but how could the Azure Dragon not know? After hesitating for a long time, he still tried to persuade Yi Xian. Looking at the worried expression on the Azure Dragon's face, Yi Xian's eyes revealed disappointment. He said in a low voice, Azure Dragon, do you know why the Earth Group is so weak and even allowed White Wolf Ming Yi and the others to bully us? Yi Xian's words caused the Azure Dragon to be startled. After hesitating for a long time, he smiled bitterly and said, the overall cultivation of the Earth Group is not high. In the past few years in the martial arts competition, without waiting for the Azure Dragon to finish speaking, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him. His voice was solemn as he said, you're wrong. Cultivation is only one aspect. The real reason why they don't put the Earth Group in their eyes is because of you. Me? The Azure Dragon was stunned. That's right, it's because of you. Yi Xian looked straight at the Azure Dragon and continued, you are always thinking about the big picture. And your style of doing things is slightly indecisive. In the eyes of outsiders, this is a kind of weak behavior. As the saying goes, the soldiers bear one, and the generals bear a nest. Today, the members of the Heaven team were injured. As the team leader, Ming Yi ignored the rules of the assembly and went on stage to avenge his team members. In your opinion, this is against the rules. But in the eyes of the members of the Heaven team, Ming Yi is standing up for them. How can they not fight for Ming Yi? Whether it's the art of controlling people or the brotherhood, you can look at the members of the Heaven group now. Perhaps you will discover something. When Yi Xian said this, he did not say anything else. Azure Dragon suddenly looked at the resting area of the Heavenly team. When he saw the admiration and reverence in the eyes of the members of the Heavenly team towards Ming Yi, Azure Dragon was completely stunned. He also seemed to understand something. The top and bottom are united and in the same boat. Even if your cultivation is not Ming Yi's match, if you act domineeringly and do not give in at all, leading the Earth Group with an iron-blooded attitude, the Earth Group will definitely not be like this. Yi Xian's words were very straightforward. So straightforward that Azure Dragon felt ashamed. However, it was the truth that Yi Xian had to say. From the moment Yi Xian entered the Wuan Agency headquarters, he had noticed this problem. The Black Team's White Wolf had bullied him, and the Heaven Team's Dark Knight did not put Azure Dragon in his eyes. All of this proved that there was a huge problem with Azure Dragon's way of doing things. From Yi Xian's point of view, Qinglong wasn't a weakling. He was just concerned about the overall situation of the Wuan Agency and didn't want to cause trouble. He was also a man of steel. However, it was precisely because of his actions that the Earth Group had fallen to such a state. Why didn't the Earth Group have a guest elder for 10 years? In fact, the reason was very simple. It was because Azure Dragon was afraid of everything. How could a true expert be willing to work with him? Even if the sky falls, there are tall people to hold it up. It's not your turn to worry. Just like the Wuan Agency, you're only the leader of Group 1, but you have to worry about the matters of Group 8. Why do you have to do this? Yi Xian said softly. Mr. Yi, I understand. After breaking through the cocoon and transforming into a butterfly, Azure Dragon clenched his fists tightly after hearing Yi Xian's words. His state of mind also underwent a tremendous change at this moment. A kind person was bullied, and a good horse was ridden. This saying had been passed down to this day, and it was not without reason. Azure Dragon also understood the meaning of this sentence. It was just that he had always been in the situation, and it was only now that he was enlightened by Yi Xian. Looking at the fighting spirit in Azure Dragon's eyes, Yi Xian slowly nodded, and then did not say anything else. Yi Xian had always believed in one principle: the strong would always be strong, and the weak would always be like dogs. Just like in real life, there would always be some people who would take a step back and take a step forward until they could no longer retreat and fell into a bottomless abyss. Only then would they suddenly wake up, but by the time they woke up, it was already too late. The meeting continued, and the members of the various groups went on stage one after another. Half a day passed very quickly. Zhang Xiaochang advanced triumphantly all the way, and all his opponents fell under his feet. until he met with the members of the Xian group. He even heavily injured them, causing the members of the Earth group to cheer loudly. The White Wolf's face was extremely gloomy, no longer having the complacent look from before. However, his vicious eyes would occasionally look at Yi Xian, and a malicious killing intent would appear in his eyes. This year's martial arts competition champion, Zhang Xiaochong of the Earth group. Zhang Xiaochong excitedly held a trophy and quickly came in front of Yi Xian, saying excitedly, "Mr. Yi, I won, I really won, I did not let you down." "You did well." Yi Xian nodded and smiled. "Wang." The air exploded as he flew up. Just as the head of Wuan announced the result, Ming Yi and Yun Shanha directly stepped onto the stage. Their gazes towards Yi Xian and the Azure Dragon were even more gloomy. "Secretary, I don't think there's any need for formalities. Since it's a spar between guest team leaders, then my Heaven Squad will take the lead," Ming Yi said coldly. The Wuan secretary smiled flatteringly and walked down the stage. It was obvious that what happened next was not something he could control. "Interesting, my Xian group will join in as well." The White Wolf and the Xian group's guest elders leaped onto the stage and looked towards Yi Xian and the Azure Dragon. Bang! The Azure Dragon slammed the table and stood up, about to step onto the stage, but before he could do anything, Yi Xian pushed him back to his seat and said, "They are here for me, this has nothing to do with you." The wind was light and the clouds were untainted by dust. Yi Xian slowly stepped onto the stage and looked straight at the four people in front of him. His face was expressionless, and no one knew what he was thinking. "Brother Ming Yi, this person has some grudges with me. How about you leave him to me?" The White Wolf laughed sinisterly. "Hurting my beloved disciple, I must personally cripple his cultivation," Ming Yi said coldly. "We don't want to hurt each other. Why don't we let this guest Yi personally choose his opponent?" Yun Shanha twirled his beard and smiled, not putting Yi Xian in his eyes at all. At this moment, whether it was the guests from the 8 directions or the people from the 8 groups, all of them cast their gazes towards the stage. When they saw the hostility the 4 ancient martial grandmasters emitted towards Yi Xian, some of them couldn't help but wipe away cold sweat for Yi Xian. "Master Azure Dragon, Mr. Yi is alone. How can he be a match for them?" A member of the Earth group wanted to say something but stopped. "Don't worry, they can't be a match for Mr. Yi. Just watch." The Azure Dragon laughed coldly, but it fell into the ears of the people of Group 8. This also caused them to be stunned. They looked at Yi Xian on the stage and were all surprised. On the stage, Yi Xian had his hands behind his back and looked at the 4 people in front of him indifferently. Their argument was very funny to Yi Xian. "There's no need to argue. All of you can come together. After all, when you step onto the stage, you're already dead," Yi Xian said indifferently. Chapter 8:4. Yi Xian's attitude caused the entire arena to go into an uproar. The expressions of the 4 people on the stage were extremely unsightly, and the White Wolf's eyes emitted a fierce light. Without waiting for the other 3 to react, the ice attribute ability within its body suddenly erupted and directly shot towards Yi Xian. The cold light was cold and the killing intent was overwhelming. Icicles filled the sky as they formed in the air. With an explosive sound that pierced through the air, they all shot towards Yi Xian. This also caused the other 3 to slightly retreat, giving way to the 2 of them. After all, if the 4 of them really joined forces to attack, not only would the guests despise them, even they themselves would not be able to get through. This was also their pride as ancient martial arts masters. "Yi Xian, you have to pay the price for your arrogance. Although I won't kill you today, I will let you end up with your cultivation crippled." White Wolf's face was ferocious and the cold air around him was extremely terrifying. As he waved his palms, a large number of ice cones had already drowned Yi Xian. Boom! The clear sky exploded and the void was trapped. Yi Xian didn't seem to have made any movements. He merely waved his hand in the air and the icicles that filled the sky instantly shattered into mist. The scene that followed caused the surrounding guests to become deathly silent. A slender and lonely figure suddenly walked out of the icy mist. A jade-like palm kept enlarging in the White Wolf's eyes. He wanted to dodge the palm with all his might, but his body seemed to be fixed in place. At this moment he couldn't move at all. White Wolf groaned and his face was full of horror. His eyes were wide open and he could not believe that Yi Xian had grabbed him by the neck and lifted him into the air. An extremely terrifying force was exerted on his throat. Crack, crack, crack. A strange sound came from his throat. Yi Xian's palm was slightly tightening. White Wolf's neck was twisted irregularly, and his face turned from red to purple. An extremely terrifying, suffocating feeling invaded his body. It was as if he would be crushed to death by Yi Xian in the next moment. Do you still remember what I told you before? Yi Xian said calmly. No. Impossible. How can you be this so strong? With Yi Xian choking his neck, White Wolf found it extremely difficult to breathe. He struggled to make a sound, and there was an indescribable fear in his eyes. White Wolf was not the only one who was terrified. At this time, everyone present suddenly stood up and looked at Yi Xian with eyes full of horror. They could not believe what they were seeing. No. Impossible. Even though the White Wolf is slightly weaker than me, why can't it even take a single move from him? Mingyi said with a trembling voice. He stared fixedly at Yi Xian in the arena, and an extremely complicated expression appeared in his eyes. Mingyi was not the only one who had this question. Everyone present had the same thought. Even though White Wolf was no match for Yi Xian, wasn't this defeat a little too simple? Could it be that his cultivation is Xiantian? Yun Shanha's voice trembled as he said a fact that everyone had already thought of. Impossible, absolutely impossible. I, Mingyi, have been practicing ancient martial arts for 30 years, and have only just touched the threshold of the Xiantian realm. This person is only around 20 years old. How can he be a Xiantian realm martial artist? Mingyi roared and refuted. It was obvious that he could not accept this fact. A stone stirred up 1,000 ripples. When the word Xiantian realm martial artist rang out, the entire venue was filled with a huge commotion. A Xiantian realm martial artist. I didn't expect this Yi Xian to be a Xiantian realm martial artist. It can't be wrong. Other than a Xiantian realm martial artist, who else can defeat an ancient martial arts grandmaster in one move? It's been 100 years, a full 100 years. I didn't expect that a Xiantian realm martial artist would appear in China again. The crowd was in an uproar. At this moment, the competition was no longer important in the eyes of the various guests. However, the matter of Yi Xian being a Xiantian realm martial artist caused a huge sensation. It was no wonder that the guests were so shocked. Xiantian realm martial artists were a legend. They were also known as humanoid war machines. They were extraordinary and were not bound by the rules of the world. They were existences that could fight against tens of thousands of troops. In the arena, Bai Lang's face was ashen, and his eyes were filled with regret. If he had known that Yi Xian was a Xiantian martial artist, how could he have provoked him? Yi, Mr. Yi, I admit defeat, the White Wolf said in a trembling voice, and there was a hint of pleading in his voice. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's expression was indifferent. When his eyes opened and closed, there was only coldness and emotionlessness. I told you before that you would die a terrible death. Have you forgotten? Yi Xian seemed to be talking about something very casual, but it made White Wolf's eyes fill with fear. Mr. Yi, you're a guest of the Earth group. You can't kill me. I'm the leader of the Xian group. If you kill me... White Wolf cried out in pain as he pointed his sword at the sky. Yi Xian chopped off one of his bloody arms. I've always been a man of my word. If I say that I'll make you die a terrible death, then I'll definitely make you die a terrible death. Yi Xian said calmly, but his actions caused the people of Group 8 to fall silent. They looked at Yi Xian with fear in their eyes. Fiendish, vicious, and merciless. This was the attitude that Yi Xian displayed in front of them. At this moment, the people of Group 8 finally realized a fact. In Mr. Ye's eyes, there was no such thing as mercy. Anyone who offended him would become a dead man. Yi Xian, you bastard. If you kill me, there will be no place for you in the Wuan department. White Wolf could tell from Yi Xian's eyes that the other party had no intention of letting him go, so he directly cursed at him. Chi! Blood splattered across the sky as screams rang out. As White Wolf cursed in pain, his limbs were cut off one by Yi Xian. His right palm suddenly exerted force and broke White Wolf's neck. He casually threw White Wolf's corpse on the ground like trash. Silence, silence, dead silence. In the arena, with broken limbs, White Wolf's corpse twitched non-stop. A strong smell of blood drifted out, making Yixian look like a demon. Group leader. Lord White Wolf. Cries and roars came from the mouths of the members of the Xian group. They glared at Yixian and wanted to take revenge for the White Wolf. However, when they saw Yixian's merciless eyes, their bodies immediately shivered and their voices became inaudible. Yixian, how dare you kill the leader of the Xian group? Mingyi roared, but he kept a distance from Yixian. Obviously, when he knew that Yixian was a Xiantian warrior, he had no intention of fighting with him. Tap tap tap. It was as if the war drums of death were beating, as if a soul-burying lament was being played. Yixian slowly walked towards Mingyi and the other two. His expression was unperturbed, but the expressions of the three of them greatly changed, and they continuously retreated. Yixian, you! What do you want to do? Do you want to kill us? Mingyi was fierce on the outside, and he was no longer arrogant on the inside. I am a very simple person. Anyone who offends me is a dead man. There has never been an exception. Like the god of the underworld, like the king of hell. Yixian's voice was very calm, but it made everyone present shudder. A feeling of death appeared in everyone's mind. Chapter 85. The whole place was silent, and the atmosphere was heavy. As far as everyone knew, when a primordial realm warrior wanted to kill someone, no one could stop him. Unless there was a warrior of the primordial realm, Minji and the other two would die without a doubt. However, was Yixian really a primordial realm warrior? He was a cultivator, and a cultivator of the crossing calamity realm. He was called the Immortal Heavenly Lord by millions of creatures. Although this world was in the age of chaos and spiritual qi did not exist in the world, and Yixian could not mobilize the power of heaven and earth to display the truly terrifying means of a cultivator, in terms of life level, the existence of a cultivator surpassed that of mortals. In this world, who could stop him? Minji was very afraid. He was really afraid. He slowly retreated because he could see from Yixian's eyes that the other party really wanted to kill him and had no scruples. Die! The air exploded as a bloody light shot out. Yixian took a step forward and suddenly appeared in front of Mingyi and the other two. Without waiting for the three of them to react, a biting cold sword qi directly slashed down towards the three of them. Fight with him! Minji trembled and roared. He gathered all the strength in his body and violently slapped at Yixian. The other two also knew that life and death were in front of them, so they could only fight with their lives on the line. Poochie! Blood appeared and cut at the waist. The two guests did not even have the strength to fight back. They were directly cut in two by Yixian. The bloody corpses made people feel even more horrified at a glance. My legs? Minji screamed miserably. His legs were cut off by Yixian. His whole body crawled on the ground. A large amount of blood flowed out from his broken legs. His extremely miserable appearance made the onlookers unable to bear to look directly at him. Mortals are really fragile. Let me send you on your last journey. Yixian slowly shook his head. His sparkling and translucent jade-like palm was blooming with a hazy blood light, as if he would kill Minji in the next moment. Enough! Suddenly, at this critical moment, a cold shout was heard. A slender figure floated into the field and directly blocked in front of Yixian. Lord Tianyu? When this person appeared, the members of Group 8 were in an uproar. Mr. Yi, you've already killed 3 people. It's time to stop. The U Group's Tianyu was the most mysterious person in the Martial Security Department. Not only was he the leader of the U Group, but there were also rumors that Tianyu might have already stepped into the Xiantian realm. However, this rumor had never been confirmed. Whoosh! Numerous figures flew over and stood behind Tianyu. They were the various group leaders and guest elders. Clearly, if they did not intervene at this time, the Wuanan agency would face a huge problem. Mr. Yi, no matter what, you are still a guest of the Earth Group. Why don't you let Mingyi live? The leader of the Zhou Group was an old man. He advised Yixian with kind words. Killing 3 was killing 4 was also killing. Yixian admitted that he was not a bloodthirsty person. However, killing people was a very effective method that could save him a lot of trouble. Although Mingyi's legs had already been cut off and he was only a cripple from now on, If it was someone else, they might really plead for mercy in front of everyone. However, with Yixian, if he wanted to kill someone, he had to die. No one could go against his will. Boom! The void exploded as a palm struck out. Tianyu and the others were caught off guard. Yixian's palm struck Mingye's head, causing him to bleed from all 7 orifices. He turned into a cold corpse and fell to the ground. His eyes were wide open before he died, proving how much he died with grievances. Dead silence. The atmosphere was heavy. When Mingyi died tragically in front of Tianyu and the others, their faces were extremely ugly. After a dozen breaths, Tianyu looked straight at Yixian. A wisp of anger appeared in his eyes as he slowly walked towards Yixian. Mr. Yi, although you are a Xiantian martial artist, you have gone too far. Xiantian earth energy gushed out, causing the void to explode incessantly. Biting cold earth energy swirled around Tianyu, as an extremely terrifying aura erupted from his body. Xianun, Xiantian martial artist? Lord Tianyu is indeed a Xiantian martial artist. When Tianyu revealed his true strength, it immediately attracted the exclamations of countless people. Everyone's gazes were focused on Yixian and Tianyu. It was obvious that a confrontation between 2 Xiantian martial artists was something that had never happened in many years. Lord Tianyu, Azure Dragon will take responsibility for this matter. I will report it to the higher-ups. Azure Dragon's expression changed when he saw Tianyu's strength. Azure Dragon, you may have forgotten. Although the Wuan Agency is divided into 8 groups, Mayu Group is in charge of punishment. Honored guest Ye's killing intent is too strong, so I can only imprison him in the warden's office and make a decision later, Tianyu said coldly. At this moment, Yixian looked at Tianyu with a playful gaze. His expression didn't change in the slightest as he said, "You're not bad. To be able to step into qi refinement at your age. No, according to what you guys said, you should be at the first level of the Xiantian realm." Yixian paused for a moment, and then his voice became strange. "But do you really think that you are a match for me? Whether I am a match for you or not, we will only know after we try. Don't you think so?" Tianyu said coldly, his body radiating with strong confidence. The battle between 2 Xiantian martial artists was about to break out, and it attracted the attention of all the guests. But at this moment, a loud noise came from the entrance of the venue, and all the guests looked towards the source of the noise. At the entrance of the venue, more than 10 ancient martial artists were clearing the way in front. Nangong Tian was leading the way respectfully. Behind him, Li Huantian's white robe was fluttering even though there was no wind. With every step he took, the sword qi around him buzzed, and 3 lotus flowers loomed above his head. With his hands behind his back, Li Huantian looked at Yixian and Tianyu indifferently. When Li Huantian arrived at the arena, he looked directly at Yixian and Tianyu. It was as if he was looking at 2 juniors. Time is like a song, and in the blink of an eye, 100 years have passed, and there are still Xiantian martial artists in the mortal world. It seems that the martial arts lineage hasn't declined yet. "You're not bad," Li Huantian said, looking at Yixian and Tianyu with admiration. "Hey, who are you, old man? Who are you to speak here?" Some guests were unhappy that Li Huantian had interrupted the battle between the 2 and yelled at him. "Noisy!" Li Huantian pointed his sword at Flowing Cloud, and the void shook. He didn't do anything, but the flying snow sword on his back suddenly came out of its sheath. A cold light flashed across the venue, and the guests couldn't open their eyes. They saw that the man who had yelled at Li Huantian had been beheaded, and his body fell to the ground. Hiss! The crowd was in an uproar and they gasped. Li Huantian's move silenced the crowd, and they looked at Li Huantian with horror. "Senior, may I know your name?" Chapter 86. In the arena, Tianyu's face was solemn because he felt an extremely heavy pressure from Li Huantian. It was as if his opponent was a mountain that he had to look up to. Even his breathing was a little hurried at this moment. "You're practicing the Northern Frost True skill. Who is Kohan Taoist to you?" Li Huantian asked seriously. Hearing Li Huantian mention Beihan Taoist, Tianyu's face changed. Beihan Taoist was his teacher and he practiced the Northern Frost True skill. No one knew who his teacher was. How could Tianyu not be shocked when this mysterious man mentioned it? "Beihan Taoist is my teacher." He passed away 20 years ago. May I know who you are? Tianyu asked cautiously. The heavenly Tao has no end. He turned into a skeleton. I didn't expect him to die so early. Li Huantian slowly shook his head. His voice sounded even more ancient, but when Tianyu heard it, he was startled. He already had some guesses in his heart. My name is Li Huantian. Have you heard your teacher mention me? Li Huantian woke up from his thoughts and stared at Tianyu. Tianyu was stunned and his body trembled uncontrollably. After a full 10 breaths of time, under the shocked eyes of all the guests, Tianyu knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Li Huantian. I'm Lin Tianyu, the 18th generation disciple of the Northern Frost sect. It's an honor to meet you, Senior Peerless Sword Immortal. Peerless Sword Immortal? Who is the Peerless Sword Immortal? There was a lot of discussion in the venue. Li Huantian became the only focus of attention at this moment. This mysterious man could make Tianyu, a Khanate martial artist, kneel down and kowtow to him. His background was simply unimaginable. I remember. 100 years ago, a peerless sword immortal appeared. He was known as the 9th master in the world. With the flying snow sword in his hand, countless Khanate martial artists were defeated by him. He was also known as the peerless sword immortal in the ancient martial world. The leader of the Ian group was an old man in his 60s. Although he did not live in that era, he had heard a lot about the people from 100 years ago. He looked at Li Huantian with a burning gaze. Could it be that you're really Senior Li Huantian? The leader of the Ian group trembled as he asked. I didn't expect that after 100 years, there would still be people who remember me, Li Huantian said calmly. As Li Huantian acknowledged his identity, the Ian group leader hurriedly knelt down. This scene instantly made everyone present aware of Li Huantian's identity. A large number of ancient martial ability users looked excited as they knelt down before him and continuously shouted his name. It was no wonder that these ancient martial ability users would make such a move. 100 years ago, Li Huantian was the 9th most powerful expert in the world. In that distant era, he was known as the Peerless Sword Immortal. 100 years later, how terrifying would Li Huantian's cultivation be? However, while everyone was bowing to Li Huantian, Yixian was the only one standing in the arena. He looked at Li Huantian with a hint of contempt in his eyes. The 5th level of qi refining. Interesting, Yixian murmured. He could see through Li Huantian's cultivation at a glance. Yixian, why don't you greet Senior Li Huantian? All of a sudden, Nangong Tian directly scolded Yixian and targeted Yixian. At this moment, Li Huantian also looked at Yixian. However, his brows slightly furrowed because he discovered something extremely shocking. He actually couldn't see through Yixian's cultivation. This kind of strange thing was something that had never happened before. There were only 2 kinds of people who could make Li Huantian unable to see through their cultivation. The first kind was ordinary people. This kind of people did not practice ancient martial arts, so their essence would not leak out. It was natural that Li Huantian could not see through their cultivation. The second kind was people whose cultivation was much higher than Li Huantian's. Li Huantian had only seen 2 people like this in his life, and these 2 people were also his targets. However, the third kind had now appeared. Li Huantian could not see through this young man in the arena at all. However, it was impossible for him to be an ordinary person. Otherwise, how could he appear in the arena? However, Li Huantian did not believe that Yixian's cultivation was much higher than his. Even if Yixian started cultivating in his mother's womb, it would only be 20 years at most. How could Yixian be his opponent? Young man, you're very interesting. You can actually restrain your cultivation. I wonder who your master is? Li Huantian looked down at Yixian and asked. Unfortunately, Yixian ignored Li Huantian's question. This scene made Li Huantian's expression change slightly. He looked at Yixian with dissatisfaction. Junior, you should know that although I was very arrogant when I was your age, I was still in awe of the seniors. Only by being in awe can you live a long life. Li Huantian spoke as if he was giving advice to the world. Mr. Yixian, you can't offend this person. Green Dragon reminded him softly. He was afraid that Li Huantian would be unhappy with Yixian. You're only at Xiantian realm level 5. How dare you criticize me? Yixian laughed. He really laughed. How could he not be amused by being reprimanded by an ant? Dong, 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 the void vibrated. Li Huantian stepped into the air and narrowed his eyes. 3 lotus flowers floated above his head as he strolled towards Yixian. Every step he took caused ripples to appear under his feet. 3 flowers at once, prominence and imperial qi levitation? Tianyu cried out in alarm when he saw Li Huantian's technique. Although he had just entered the Xiantian realm and could not reach Li Huantian's level, how could he not see how terrifying Li Huantian's cultivation was? Humph, pretentious. Yixian snorted coldly. When he opened and closed his eyes, a blood-red light flashed. He took a step forward and endless explosions came from all directions. Under everyone's shocked gazes, Yixian rose from the ground and faced Li Huantian. How is this possible? Li Huantian's technique had already made Tianyu regard him as a god. However, when Yixian also displayed his imperial qi levitation technique, Tianyu felt as if he had fallen into a dream. He did not expect Yixian to be so strong. It seemed like he had the strength to rival Li Huantian. Not only was Tianyu's expression wooden, the entire venue had also become deathly silent. It was all because the cultivation that Yixian was gradually revealing was simply too shocking. At this moment, Li Huantian frowned as he looked at Yixian with a solemn expression. He never thought that a junior would have such a tyrannical cultivation when he returned to the mortal world. A person's cultivation was formed through the accumulation of time. However, this was not absolute. There were always people in this world who were unparalleled and talented. Their cultivation could not be judged by their age. Obviously, in Li Huantian's eyes, Yixian was such a person. Li Huantian was envious, jealous, and extremely unwilling. He asked himself, if I had Yixian's unparalleled talent, I wouldn't have wasted 100 years. I would have broken through the Xiantian 9th stage and stepped into the legendary Earth Immortal realm. A person's jealousy was very terrible. Although Li Huantian was a god in everyone's eyes, he was only a human after all. Humans could not avoid the 7 emotions and 6 desires. Therefore, when he looked at Yixian, a cold killing intent gradually emerged in his eyes. I really didn't expect that a monstrous genius like you would appear in this world after 100 years of seclusion. If you were given more time, wouldn't you have stepped into the Earth Immortal realm? Li Huantian said gloomily, his eyes full of jealousy. Earth Immortal realm? Yixian smiled contemptuously and said, it seems that you have some misunderstanding about the word immortal. Your life level has always been at the level of immortal. Your ignorance really makes me laugh. Junior, you're courting death. Clang! 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 The flying snow sword buzzed and emitted a cold sword light. It floated directly in front of Li Huantian, as if it would attack Yixian in the next moment. Come on, let me see how capable you are. Yixian's smile was cruel and his voice became more and more playful. Chapter 87. Rumble. When Li Huantian unleashed his cultivation of Xiantian 5th stage, the void trembled and the air exploded. He held the flying snow sword in his hand and pointed the Xiantian sword qi at Yixian. Sword 1. The Xiantian sword qi exploded. Li Huantian seemed to have transformed into a peerless immortal sword. When he slashed out, a monstrous sword light shot toward Yixian. Sword controlling qi? That's all you got. Yixian's expression didn't change in the face of Li Huantian's sword light. A pair of sword fingers tore through the sky, and a blood-red heavenly sword condensed in the air. The blood-red heavenly sword even emitted the miserable screams of ghosts. Slash! Yixian uttered a simple word. The blood-red heavenly sword buzzed violently and slashed toward Li Huantian with unparalleled power. Bang! There was a loud noise and the void trembled. When the two forces collided, an extremely terrifying airwave shot out in all directions and instantly submerged the two. Their eardrums buzzed and their vision blurred. No one knew what the result was. After a full 10 breaths, when everyone's vision became clear, they were completely stunned by the scene in front of them. It was as if they had fallen into a dream. In the void, Yixian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, looking calm. On the other hand, Li Huantian had already fallen to the ground. He held the flying snow sword in his hand and looked uninjured. However, he looked at Yixian with a dignified expression. In everyone's imagination, Yi Xian was no match for Li Huantian, the peerless sword celestial from 100 years ago. Perhaps Yi Xian would be turned into a cold corpse by Li Huantian's sword. However, the truth was the opposite. Yi Xian was not dead, but Li Huantian had fallen to the void. How could they not be surprised? Senior Huantian, are you okay? Nangong Tian's face was gloomy and he asked cautiously, Junior, you're not bad. You're good enough to be my opponent. 3 days later, we'll fight on the top of the Forbidden City. After Li Huantian finished speaking, he suddenly turned around and left the venue. Nangong Tian's expression was complicated. He didn't know why Li Huantian wanted to leave, but since his backer had already left, he could only glare fiercely at Yi Xian and quickly follow Li Huantian. In the void, Yi Xian looked at the backs of Li Huantian and Nangong Tian. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled into a playful smile. He didn't stop the two of them from leaving, and an unfathomable light appeared in his eyes. Mr. Yi, are you all right? Azure Dragon asked anxiously. Do you think something will happen to me? Yi Xian lightly smiled as he walked down from the sky. At this moment, everyone looked at Yi Xian with respect. Tian Yu and the others had a complicated expression. They did not dare to look into Yi Xian's eyes and quietly returned to their resting area. However, when they looked at Yi Xian from the corner of their eyes, they were filled with fear. Obviously, Yi Xian's ability to block Li Huantian's attack had changed everyone's impression of Yi Xian. Tian Yu had no intention of capturing Yi Xian. He did not mention that Ming Yi and the others had died in Yi Xian's hands. When a person was strong enough to be looked up to, the so-called rules were useless. Tian Yu understood this, so he would not risk his life. If he provoked Yi Xian into killing, wouldn't he die in vain like Ming Yi? Tian Yu would never do such a stupid thing. The annual meeting of the Wuan Bureau ended with a weak ending. However, Yi Xian's reputation spread throughout the upper class of Capital City. When the father and son of the Yi family left, they were filled with regret. If they had not chased Yi Xian and his mother out of the family, how glorious would the Yi family be today? However, there was no medicine for regret in this world. The father and son of the Yi family could only leave with regret. Before they left, they instructed a servant to pass a note to Yi Xian. The luxurious car drove slowly on the road towards the Nangong family's villa. In the car, Li Huantian was resting with his eyes closed. Nangong Tian was confused. He could not help but ask, Senior Huantian, why didn't you kill him just now? All of a sudden, as soon as Nangong Tian finished his sentence, Li Huantian spat out a mouthful of blood, staining the car window red. His rosy face turned pale instantly, and his straight body was trembling slightly. This? Looking at the scene in front of him, Nangong Tian was at a loss for words. He was dumbfounded. What a powerful sword chi! What a hidden junior! This old man's illustrious reputation was almost destroyed by this junior. Li Huantian opened his eyes slowly and wiped away the blood at the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with viciousness. Senior, are you no match for him? Nangong Tian came back to his senses and asked in a trembling voice. If I'm not wrong, he must be at Xiantian Realm LV6. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been injured by his attack just now. Li Huantian clenched his fists with fear in his eyes. Then, does that mean that the Nangong family will? Hearing Li Huantian's words, Nangong Tian's eyes were filled with despair. If even Li Huantian was no match for Yi Xian, wouldn't the Nangong family be slaughtered by Yi Xian sooner or later? Don't worry. Although his cultivation is slightly higher than mine, I've reached the end of my life. I can burn my essence and blood to have a final battle with him. Even a Xiantian Realm LV7 will die under my sword, let alone a Xiantian Realm LV6, Li Huantian said gloomily. But senior, if you do that, won't you also? Nangong Tian's eyes were filled with joy, but he still pretended to be concerned about Li Huantian. I have 1 more year to live at most. I've lived long enough. I can't let this junior ruin my reputation before I reach the end of my life, Li Huantian said coldly. If it was said that Li Huantian had only attacked Yi Xian in order to fulfill his promise, then it was completely different now. If he didn't kill Yi Xian, then his reputation would be ruined if word of today's matter spread. It was also because of this reason that before Li Huantian left, He challenged Yi Xian to a battle to the death at the peak of the Forbidden City in 3 days for the sake of his reputation. Even Li Huantian was no exception to the saying that false reputations hurt people. He had only been defeated twice in his life, but both times he was defeated by the most talented people of his generation. If he was defeated by a junior 100 years later, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. Burning his essence and blood to have a final battle with Yi Xian would make the name of the extinctive sword Immortal spread forever. Even if Li Huantian died, he would be able to smile in the underworld. However, was the truth really as simple as Li Huantian thought? Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Find me a quiet place. I'm going to fast and take a bath for 3 days. No matter what happens during these 3 days, don't disturb me, Li Huantian said and closed his eyes to rest again. Yes, Senior Tian, Nangong Tian replied respectfully, but there was a deep look in his eyes. Chapter 88. The Nangong Family. When Nangong Tian saw Li Huantian enter seclusion, he took out his phone and made a call quickly. "Anta, I need your help. If Yi Xian is still alive in 3 days, you can launch an attack directly. The Nangong family will also leave Xia country and cooperate with your organization completely." "Oh Satan above, you're too crazy. But I like your craziness very much. I welcome the Nangong family on behalf of the organization." A foreign man's voice came from the other end of the phone. If Yi Xian heard this voice, he would definitely remember that this was the voice of the terrorist leader who wanted to blow up the plane. The call ended. The craziness in Nangong Tian's eyes intensified. Seeing Li Huantian injured today made him uneasy, so he made preparations for both sides. Even if Li Huantian couldn't kill Yi Xian in 3 days, the weapon in Anta's hand would definitely be able to make him die without a burial ground. The news of the battle between Li Huantian and Yi Xian spread like wildfire, and became the focus of all the upper class in capital city. At the same time, a large number of ancient martial artists appeared in capital city. Some ancient martial artist family representatives even went to the Nangong family to visit Li Huantian, but they were stopped by Nangong Tian. He even told these ancient martial artist family representatives that Li Huantian and Yi Xian would fight on the top of the Forbidden City in 3 days. Capital city in a nameless courtyard house. Yi Xian unfolded the note in his hand. When he finished reading the contents of the note, a cold murderous intent appeared on his gentle face. It was indeed the Nangong family's doing. Yi Xian said softly. The note was delivered by a servant sent by the father and son of the Yi family. The content of the note was very simple, and the words expressed humility. However, this wasn't the main point. The main point was that the missile attack on Yi Xian was done by the Nangong family, and had nothing to do with the Yi family. They hoped that Yi Xian would visit the Yi family when he was free. In fact, even without the Yi family's letter, Yi Xian had already guessed that the missile attack was done by the Nangong family. Although the Nangong family was one of the 8 dominant families, they should have known about Yi Xian's methods and how important he was to the Xia country's big shots. Logically speaking, the Nangong family wouldn't dare to openly cause trouble for Yi Xian. However, during the annual meeting of the Martial Security Department, Nangong Tian invited Li Huantian to attack him without any scruples. It was obvious that the Nangong family had a guilty conscience and exposed themselves. The Nangong family's Yi Xian and the Nangong family and Yi Xian's plan and Yi Xian's suspicions. Ant's family's is family. However, now that the Yi family's message had confirmed this matter, Yi Xian was finally certain that this was indeed the doing of the Nangong family. Since the truth had been found out, in Yi Xian's eyes, Li Huantian and the Nangong family were destined to die. That was an unchangeable fact. The only thing that made Yi Xian feel a little relieved was that Yi Ping, who was in Jiangnan City, did not participate in this incident. Hence, the killing intent in his heart disappeared. Although Yi Xian was cruel, overbearing and ruthless, he was still a human. As a human, he had 7 emotions and 6 desires. If he killed Yi Ping behind Mrs. Ye's back, he could totally imagine how devastated Mrs. Yi would be when she saw Yi Ping's corpse. Kinship was Yi Xian's burden. He also admitted that this burden made him feel as if his hands and feet were tied. However, as a person, there would always be a kind side to him. Yi Xian's kindness was all given to Mother Yi. This was also to repay Mother Ye's kindness for raising him for so many years. The difficult problem was solved, and Yixian felt much better physically and mentally at this moment. Azure Dragon, send this note up there and pass it on to the leaders for me. In 3 days, the Nangong family will no longer exist. Yixian casually passed the note to Azure Dragon, then turned around and walked towards the house. Qinglong quickly read the contents of the note, and his eyes were full of anger. He quickly left the courtyard and reported the situation to the few big shots of Xia Nation. The few big shots replied very quickly, telling Yixian not to have any scruples and that they would always stand behind Yixian. At the same time, the secretary of Wu and reported to the few big shots about what Yixian had done during the annual meeting of the Wu and department. The team leaders also came forward to testify, but the response that they received made the people of the Wu and department speechless. Yixian was the protector of Xia Nation. As long as he did not harm the interests of Xia Nation, there was no need to report to them. After receiving such a reply from the few big shots, the people of the Wu and department finally understood how important Yixian was in the hearts of the few big shots. This also made them smile bitterly and sigh. White Wolf and Mingyi had really died unjustly. However, it was also this matter that sounded the alarm for the people of the Wu and department, making them understand a principle. They absolutely could not offend Yixian. If they offended this person, their fate would be extremely miserable. Xueji, the leader of the Desolate group, was extremely uneasy. She could not forget Yixian's strange gaze and the words he had said. How can he tell that I'm a demon? Xueji's face was pale as she mumbled to herself. A trace of worry flashed across her eyes. 3 days later, a crescent moon hung in the night sky. Under the starry sky, it gave people a feeling of incomparable beauty. The Forbidden City was the capital of the previous dynasty. Now it had become a place for tourists from all over the world. However, tonight, the Forbidden City was closed to visitors. The area within a radius of 10 miles was even more heavily guarded. Ordinary people were not allowed to set foot in it. Under the Forbidden City, a large number of ancient martial ability users had gathered here. There were also celebrities and tycoons from all over the world watching from afar. The decisive battle between 2 primordial warriors was a grand event that had not been seen in decades. This battle was destined to be recorded in the history of the ancient martial world, leaving behind a fascinating legend for the future generations. Buzz! The void buzzed and ripples spread out. The sound of an explosion came from afar. Before the people could see clearly who had come, a slender figure had already appeared above the Forbidden City. He was dressed in a moon-white robe, with silver-white hair at his temples. He held the flying snow sword in his arms. Under the moonlight, he gave people a sense of transcendence. 100 years ago, the 9th master in the world was respected by the world as the Absolute Sword Immortal. He was Li Huantian. Greetings, Senior Absolute Sword Immortal. When Li Huantian appeared, all the ancient martial ability users were very excited. They all bowed to him, which was also a kind of respect for the senior. Unfortunately, Li Huantian didn't pay any attention to the people under the city. His eyes were slightly closed. It seemed that even the collapse of the world could not disturb Li Huantian's state of mind at this moment. But if one looked carefully, they would find that the veins in Li Huantian's palm were bulging. Obviously, his heart was not as calm as he looked. Take a guess, who do you think will win? Needless to say, it must be Senior Huantian. He was the 9th master in the world 100 years ago. There is even a rumor that he has stepped into the primordial 5th stage. That's not necessarily true. I heard that in the annual meeting of the Wuan Bureau, Senior Huantian was suspected to be slightly inferior to Yixian. It's just a short fight. How can you tell the result? If Senior Huantian is really no match for Yixian, why would he issue a letter of challenge and fight with him in the Forbidden City today? All kinds of discussions were heard. Most people were not optimistic about Yixian. After all, the Absolute Sword Immortal had been famous for 100 years, and was a legend in the ancient martial world. Although Yixian had become famous recently, how could he compare with Li Huantian? Chapter 89. While the crowd was discussing, a military car drove over from afar. As the car door was opened by Azure Dragon, Yixian's figure appeared in front of everyone. Yixian didn't walk across the sky like everyone had imagined, nor did he have a magnificent aura. Instead, He walked towards the forbidden city like an ordinary person. Although Yixian didn't show any power, the crowd unconsciously made way for Yixian to walk alone. You're finally here. On top of the forbidden city, Li Huantian opened his eyes, and a sharp sword qi burst out from his body. The flying snow sword in his hand buzzed, and he raised his essence, qi, and spirit to the extreme. He looked at Yixian with a burning gaze. Unfortunately, Yixian didn't respond at all. He walked slowly until he stepped into the void and reached the top of the city, as if Li Huantian didn't exist. Yixian's attitude angered Li Huantian, and the crowd looked at him in surprise. They couldn't understand why Yixian was so casual in front of Li Huantian, a master of Xiantian Stage 5. Could it be that this Mr. Yi did not know that perhaps after this battle, he would become a cold corpse? Yixian didn't know what the crowd was thinking, and even if he knew, he wouldn't care at all. In fact, in Yixian's eyes, Li Huantian was just a joke. He could kill this person with a pinch of his finger, so why would he care about him? Li Huantian was a cultivator at the crossing calamity stage. Although this world was at the end of the Dharma ending age, and the spiritual qi of heaven and earth didn't exist in the world, and Yixian couldn't use the skills of a cultivator, why would he care about a nobody at the stage 5 of qi cultivation? At this moment, Yixian looked over and didn't see Nangong Tian's figure. This caused him to frown slightly. A bad feeling arose in his heart, and a pondering expression flashed through his eyes. Junior, you're too arrogant. Li Huantian could completely feel that Yixian didn't place him in his eyes. This caused him to roar in anger as his eyes turned scarlet red. Yixian snapped out of his thoughts and looked at Li Huantian for the first time. His voice was gloomy as he said, "Old man, you know you're no match for me, yet you still want to court death. Do you really think I won't kill you?" Whoosh! When the crowd heard this, it immediately caused a huge uproar. They focused their attention on Li Huantian, and a look of surprise flashed across their eyes. Could it be that the rumors are true? Is Senior Heaven Summoner really no match for Yixian? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Li Huantian's face turned red and his hand that was holding the flying snow sword trembled uncontrollably. Junior, you've gone too far. Li Huantian roared crazily. His face was flushed and his Xiantian Gang Qi was violently buzzing around his body. His Xiantian 5th stage cultivation was strangely rising, and a misty 5-colored light was condensing above his head. 5 Qi's unification? Could this be the legendary 5 Qi's unification stage? Tianyu, who was below the city, shouted in a trembling voice. His eyes were filled with excitement. Master Tianyu, what's 5 Qi's unification? A warrior asked in surprise. At this time, Tianyu was trembling incessantly as he explained the 5 Qi's unification realm to the people around him. Everyone's face gradually turned pale, and they looked at Li Huantian with awe. What was 5 Qi's unification? The Xiantian 9th stage was divided into 3 major realms. The first 3 realms were for ordinary Xiantian warriors, which was Tianyu's realm, but he was just a beginner. The 4th to 6th realms were called 3 flowers at one's prominence. Xiantian warriors had already reached a higher level, and could float in the air, and use flying swords to kill people. The last 3 realms were called 5 Qi's unification. When a Xiantian warrior stepped into the 7th realm, a 5-colored light would condense above his head, and his cultivation would improve qualitatively. It was an exaggeration to say that he could take a person's head from 1,000 miles away, but it was true that he could kill people with his mind. There was also a legend that when one stepped into the 5 Qi's unification realm, he had already peeped into the legendary Earth Immortal realm. Rumble! Waves of qi rolled and the void exploded. Li Huantian stepped into the void, his innate gang qi rolling in all directions. The flying snow sword buzzed, and sword qi filled the sky around him. His unparalleled power was overwhelming. Junior, if you kneel and kowtow to this old man and beg for forgiveness, this old man might still spare your life today. Li Huantian's majesty was awe-inspiring, and gave people a feeling of inviolability. He looked down at Yixian from the void and his voice echoed in the air. Looking at Li Huantian in the void, Yixian smiled. He really smiled, but it was a contemptuous smile. It was as if he had found a clown who kept acting coquettishly in front of him, but could not arouse his interest at all, burning your blood essence and fighting to the death. You're not bad. Yixian nodded slowly. Come, let me see what you can do after your cultivation has improved. Yi Xian put his hands behind his back and said calmly, Go to hell. Faced with Yi Xian's provocation, Li Huantian went completely crazy. He violently unsheathed his flying snow sword and slashed through the sky with a sword light of more than 10 feet. The dazzling sword light seemed to tear the darkness apart and directly slashed at Yi Xian. Rumble! The void exploded and the sword chi buzzed. When Li Huantian displayed this invincible sword attack, the people below the city retreated in horror, afraid that they would be implicated and suffer unimaginable injuries. Boom! Suddenly Yi Xian moved. He took a step forward and ripples appeared under his feet. He slapped the air with his palm and directly shattered Li Huantian's innate sword light. Then, he appeared in front of Li Huantian in an extremely strange manner. His sword was like the sky, capable of destroying everything. Yi Xian pointed out with both of his fingers, causing a ripple to appear in the air. Following a crisp sound, the flying snow sword in Li Huantian's hand transformed into a cold star that sprinkled down from the sky. Li Huantian was forced to continuously retreat with an incomparably lifeless expression on his face. The world was silent and everything was quiet. This scene happened in an instant, but it made Li Huantian and everyone else tremble uncontrollably. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it even if they were beaten to death. Buzz! Flickering light and passing shadow moonlight steps. When Yi Xian appeared in front of Li Huantian again, his jade-like palm had already grabbed Li Huantian's neck and directly shattered his True Kong shield. Boring, really boring. You're really weak, aren't you? Li Huantian seemed to have turned into a chicken, and was slowly lifted into the air by Yi Xian. No. Impossible. I burned my essence blood. Innate 7th stage. Why? At this moment, Li Huantian no longer cared about life and death. His eyes were full of despair and confusion. He really could not understand why he was still not Yi Xian's opponent. He had cultivated for 100 years and burned all his essence blood at the end of his life. Chapter 90. Could you be? Suddenly, a thought flashed across Li Huantian's mind. He looked at Yi Xian abruptly. When he saw the indifference in Yi Xian's eyes, he felt as if his soul had left his body and his body was trembling uncontrollably. Tell me where Nangong Tian is and I'll leave your corpse intact, Yi Xian said calmly. Ha. Suddenly, Li Huantian laughed hysterically. As he laughed, a large amount of tears flowed out of his eyes. The legend is true. That legend is actually true. To think that I, Li Huantian, would be able to see it before I die. Before Li Huantian could finish his sentence, Yi Xian tightened his grip, making Li Huantian speechless. Obviously, Yi Xian understood that Li Huantian had seen through his identity as a cultivator. Tell me where Nangong Tian is, Yi Xian repeated. With Yi Xian choking his neck, Li Huantian spat out with great difficulty. With a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said, Yi Xian, you can't hold on. When the whole world knows your identity, you will. You really have a lot of nonsense to say, Yi Xian said coldly. Crack. Under Yi Xian's terrifying strength, the sound of Li Huantian's throat breaking could be heard. Li Huantian's head tilted and his neck was broken by Yi Xian. Li Huantian's eyes were wide open before he died, proving that he died with a grievance. Bang! Yi Xian threw Li Huantian's body away as if it was a piece of trash. It even smashed a big hole in the ground. The crowd at the foot of the city wall was dead silent. They stared at Li Huantian's body for a long time without coming back to their senses. Silence, a deathly silence. This strange atmosphere lasted for a full minute until an ancient warrior's legs gave way and he fell to the ground. All kinds of gasps could be heard from the crowd. Senior Huantian dead? He's dead. What? Several trembling voices could be heard. It was like a chain reaction. Countless ancient warriors with superpowers were muttering to themselves. When they looked up at Yi Xian, there was not only respect in their eyes, but also an indescribable fear. 100 years ago, he was the 9th most powerful man in the world, and was known as the ultimate sword immortal. Today, he had even stepped into the Five Qis unification. However, such a powerful existence had actually died so easily in Yi Xian's hands. How could this not cause everyone's hearts to shatter? All of a sudden, before everyone could recover from their horror, they saw a beam of light soar into the sky from the Forbidden City. It quickly turned into a void projection and appeared in front of everyone. On the projection, a man wearing a ghost mask was sitting in a pitch-black space. Who else could it be other than Nangong Tian, who was sitting beside him? Clap, clap, clap. A round of applause could be heard from the projection. No one could see the expression of the man in the mask, but he said with a Xia accent, "I passed by Mr. Yi in a hurry on the plane. I didn't expect to meet you again under such circumstances. Mr. Yi, you've made a name for yourself today. I'm deeply impressed." "And how cut the crap. Kill him." Nangong Tian's expression was vicious. He stared at Yixian through the projection as if he wanted to skin Yixian alive. At this moment, Yixian looked at the two people in the projection calmly. There was no change in his expression, and no one could tell what he was thinking. "If I were you, I wouldn't be so stupid as to help Nangong Tian," Yixian said calmly. No. In the name of Satan, Mr. Yi, you're wrong. You're the stupid one, not me. The Nangong family has joined our organization, so of course, I have to protect the Nangong family." However, at this point, his voice paused for a moment and became extremely cold as he said, "Moreover, Mr. Yi, you're too arrogant. This world doesn't only have ancient martial arts. The technological weapons we have are existences that you can't imagine." Yi Zichen frowned and said, "Moreover, Mr. Yi, you're too arrogant. Yixian, you bastard. You killed my beloved daughter. I'll make sure you die without a burial place even if I have to give you all my assets." Nangong Tian roared crazily in the projection. "Mr. Yi, let me send you to meet Satan. You can enjoy this technological feast." After the man in the mask finished speaking, the projection in the air slowly disappeared. However, a blue light screen suddenly rose around the Forbidden City, trapping Yixian in the air. Sizzle! Hundreds of small drones rose from remote corners and surrounded Yixian in the air. Micro-ion cannon? HR-3 photon gun? Oh my god, is that the Wire-1 liquid bomb? When these technological weapons appeared in front of everyone, they immediately screamed in horror. Then they scattered like birds, afraid that the aftershock of these technological weapons would turn them into ashes. "Mr. Yi, run. These weapons are not something that can be stopped by humans." Azure Dragon's face was pale as he shouted at Yixian in the air. His eyes were filled with anxiety. As the leader of the Earth Group, Azure Dragon was very familiar with these technological weapons, even though he majored in ancient martial arts. No one knew how terrifying these weapons were better than him. Since ancient times, heroes used martial arts to break the law, and scholars used Confucianism to break the law. Why did the ancient martial arts families hide? Why did the Xia country set up the Martial Security Department? Why did the ancient martial artists with superpowers not dare to act recklessly, even though they had superhuman powers? It was because of the deterrence brought by technological weapons. In the end, humans were made of flesh and blood. Who could resist technological weapons? It was not only the Xia country but also the other countries in the world. If there were no technological weapons to intimidate these people with ancient martial arts abilities, the world would have long been in chaos. No matter how strong you are, can you withstand a nuclear bomb? Under that kind of terrifying power, everything would be turned into ashes. Therefore, in front of the colossus of the world, an individual's bravery would never be worth mentioning. From this, it could be seen how terrifying technological weapons were. However, Yixian was not an ancient martial artist. He was an immortal cultivator, and a cultivator at that. This was an unsolved mystery. "Azure Dragon, you can leave now." Under the waning moon in the air, Yixian narrowed his eyes and looked at the hundreds of drones around him. There was not the slightest bit of fear in his eyes as a bloody light spread out from his body. "Mr. Yi, if I leave, what will you do?" Azure Dragon asked anxiously. "Don't worry, they're underestimating me if they think they can kill me with such a childish weapon." Yixian sneered as a blood-red killing intent flashed across his eyes. Yixian was known as the Undying Heavenly Lord by the creatures in the Blood Sea battlefield. This title was definitely not just for show. He had experienced countless life and death tribulations, but he still managed to survive. The Undying Heavenly Sovereign, as the name implied, the word undying had an extremely profound meaning. Chapter 91. Yi Xian was calm and composed. That was the attitude that Yi Xian displayed. Azure Dragon had already left. However, he kept looking back at Yi Xian with worry in his eyes before he left. Boom! 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 The explosions in the night sky were deafening. There were miniature ion cannons, HR-3 photon guns, and even terrifying liquid bombs. When these technological weapons displayed their power, dazzling sparks exploded in the sky above the Forbidden City. The air was scorching, and the air was turbulent. Heaven and earth seemed to be shaking at this moment, and the citizens of Jindo City woke up from their sleep in fear, not knowing what had happened. At the same time, in a mysterious residence in Jindo City, the man with the ghost mask and Nangong Tian stared at the screen through the surveillance camera. Nangong Tian was extremely excited when they saw Yi Xian being engulfed by the sparks. He's dead. This bastard is finally dead. Nangong Tian roared excitedly. Oh, praise you, Satan. What a beautiful firework. The man with the ghost mask made a praying gesture as if he had turned into a devout believer. However, before the two of them could raise their glasses to celebrate, the sparks on the screen were slowly dissipating. A blurry figure appeared on the screen, and the two of them were stunned. Zoom in, zoom in. The man with the ghost mask was no longer calm. His eyes through the mask were filled with fear. Apart from the grimace man, Nangong Tian's face was also as pale as a sheet. He stared at the scene on the screen until the camera zoomed in, and a face that made him shudder appeared in front of him. How is this possible? In the image, Yi Xian was completely unharmed. He stood in the void and smiled at Nangong Tian and Nangong Tian through the screen. However, his smile was bone-chilling. Oh my God, how did he survive? The man with the ghost mask trembled and roared. His confidence in winning collapsed completely, and he felt extremely uneasy. On the Forbidden City, Yi Xian's eyes were emotionless when he opened them. He stared at the drone in front of him. Through the pinhole camera, he seemed to have crossed the barrier of time and space and was staring at Nangong Tian and Yi Xian. Nangong Tian, you can't run away. Yi Xian smiled cruelly and smashed the drone into smithereens before disappearing into the void. Although the two of them were separated from Yi Xian by a screen, their bodies tensed up and they trembled uncontrollably when they saw Yi Xian's cruel smile. They only recovered after dozens of breaths. Brother Nangong, this Yi Xian is definitely not an ordinary ancient warrior. I'll send you out of China immediately to prevent any mishaps. The masked man quickly spoke as a hint of worry appeared in his eyes. No, I want to leave with my family. Didn't you arrange for a helicopter to send us out of China tonight? Nangong Tian asked with a trembling voice. Looking at Nangong Tian's pale face, the masked man said with a malicious look, the Wuhan agency has been keeping an eye on the 8 big families in capital city and investigating the missile attack. We don't dare to act rashly. However, the Wuhan agency must be in chaos after tonight's attack. They don't have time to keep an eye on the Nangong family. I've already sent people to pick up your family, but you have to leave China now. Otherwise, if Yi Xian finds you, our whereabouts will be exposed to him. What Nangong Tian was most worried about was that something would happen to the Nangong family. With the guarantee of the grimace man, he started to pack up and prepare to leave China tonight. As for the enmity with Yi Xian, he could only take revenge in the future. At the same time at the Nangong family, the lights were brightly lit and it was noisy. Several helicopters landed on the lawn and made loud noises. Nangong Tian's family was packing up and preparing to leave China. Buzz! The void vibrated and the air exploded. Before the Nangong family could board the helicopter, Yi Xian's figure suddenly appeared. His face was cruel and emotionless. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was a blood-red glow. Chi! He pointed his sword at the sky and the air exploded. Several beams of blood-red light shot out and cut the helicopter on the lawn into two. As Yi Xian waved his hand, several pilots were sucked in front of him. Tell me, where is Nangong Tian? Yi Xian said calmly. The pilots were already shocked by Yi Xian's methods. They knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Their voices trembled as they said, We don't know anything, we're just following orders to send the Nangong family out of China. What's the use of having you if you can't give me the answer I want? Yi Xian squinted his eyes and smiled cruelly. He raised his sword and a few streams of blood splattered in the air. The pilots turned into headless corpses and fell to the ground. They couldn't be more dead. Yixian, you have no respect for the law. How dare you kill people in the Nangong family? All of a sudden, a middle-aged man roared angrily. Behind him was a large number of people from the Nangong family. They looked at Yixian with fear. Ha law. I am the law. What's your relationship with Nangong Tian? Yixian squinted his eyes and asked. Nangong Tian is my father. My name is Nangong Ming. Yixian, what do you want? Nangong Ming clenched his fists tightly. His gaze towards Yixian was filled with anger. But there was also an indescribable fear. Looking at Nangong Ming's angry face and the people from the Nangong family behind him, a creepy smile appeared on Yixian's face. I have a big question. In Nangong Tian's eyes, is his life more important or the lives of his family more important? It was like a devil's smile and a devil's whisper. When Yixian's words entered Nangong Ming's ears, he felt a chill down his spine. What do you want? I'm telling you, don't do anything rash. Otherwise my father won't let you go. Nangong Ming kept retreating and his face was extremely pale. Yixian slowly shook his head. His smile remained the same as ever as he said, No. You might have misunderstood. I just want to meet your father. It's just that the choice is in your father's hands. This is your son, right? Yixian's gaze was strange. He looked at a 7 or 8-year-old child behind Nangong Ming and directly walked towards him. Little friend, can you tell me who they are to you? Yixian smiled warmly as he caressed the child's hair bun. Although the child was young, he could tell that Yixian wasn't a good person. He pushed Yixian's hand away and hid behind Nangong Ming. He said, You bad guy, I'm not going to tell you. TSK. Yixian shook his head slowly and looked straight at Nangong Ming. He said, If you know your place, bring me your family's genealogy. Otherwise, I can't guarantee what will happen next. It was a blatant threat. Nangong Ming could tell from Yixian's expression that if he didn't follow Yixian's instructions, his son behind him would be killed. Chapter 92. The genealogy is here. Don't mess around. Nangong Ming said with a trembling voice. He passed a book to Yixian and pulled the child back. Yixian flipped open the genealogy and compared the names and photos on it. He scanned through the members of the Nangong family, and a strange bloody light flickered in his eyes. Not bad, everything is here. You've done well and I'm very satisfied. Yixian closed the genealogy and smiled creepily. He said in a cold voice, All of you, kneel down now and video call Nangong Tian. Don't tell me that you can't contact him. Otherwise, I don't know what I'll do. In your dreams. All of a sudden, a girl's voice was heard from the crowd. A young lady walked out quickly and pointed at Yixian. She scolded angrily, You demon, even if the entire Nangong family dies here, we won't give in to you. Yixian smiled brightly when he saw the young lady. He said, Nangong Ling, the 4th miss of the Nangong family. It's a pity that you're going to turn into a corpse at such a young age. It's indeed a spoil sport. Whoosh! A wisp of blood light tore through the night sky. Yixian's smile didn't change. Under the dumbfounded gazes of everyone, a bloody scar appeared on the woman's throat. Fresh blood spurted out, and her eyes widened as she slowly fell to the ground. Is there anyone else who wants to object to my suggestion? Yixian looked at the members of the Nangong family as if he had just done something casual. Auntie, sister, my daughter. All sorts of cries rang out, causing the entire Nangong family to fall into grief. The way they looked at Yixian was filled with hatred that even the 3 rivers and 4 seas couldn't wash away. Do you hate? Are you angry? Are you resentful? Yixian shook his head slowly and said eerily, It's a pity that you don't have the ability to take revenge. Follow my instructions and contact Nangong Tian now. Otherwise, the child will be the next to die. Yixian's sword-like fingers flickered with blood-red light, as if she was going to kill the child in the next moment. Promise you. Nangong Ming's body trembled as he held the child tightly in his arms. However, at this moment he was on the verge of breaking down. Nangong Ming took out his phone and hesitated. However, when he saw the terrified face of the child behind him, he decided to video call Nangong Tian. A helicopter was rumbling loudly on the rooftop of a skyscraper. Nangong Tian was sitting in it, but his face was still pale. Ring ring ring. A melodious ringtone was heard. Nangong Tian was elated when he saw the name displayed on the phone. He quickly picked up the video call. "Hey Minger, have you guys left Xia country?" Nangong Tian asked anxiously before he could see the video clearly. "Dad." On the other end of the video call, Nangong Ming's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. Even his voice was trembling, which made Nangong Tian feel extremely uneasy. What happened?" Nangong Tian asked with a trembling voice. However, before Nangong Ming could answer, the video call shook until Yixian's face appeared in front of Nangong Tian's eyes. Nangong Tian's expression changed drastically, and his eyes widened. "Yixian!" Nangong Tian yelled in horror. "TSK. Master Nangong, are you leaving Xia country?" In the video call, Yixian had a smile on his face as he pointed his phone camera at the members of the Nangong family. When Nangong Tian saw his daughter lying in a pool of blood, he bit his dry lips and tears flowed uncontrollably from his eyes. "Yixian, you devil, you inhumane executioner!" Nangong Tian yelled at the top of his lungs. However, Yixian ignored Nangong Tian's yelling in the video call. At this moment, a large number of the Nangong family members were kneeling on the cold ground. Yixian was holding the bloodthirsty demonic sword, and the blood-colored sword looked like it was going to kill them at any moment. "I'm curious, how would you choose between your life and the lives of your family members?" Yixian strolled in front of the Nangong family members with a cruel smile on his face. "Yixian, I beg you, please don't hurt them. I can agree to whatever conditions you have." Nangong Tian looked as if he had aged 10 years. His face was full of tears as he pleaded with Yixian on the other end of the phone. TSK, this doesn't seem like Master Nangong's style. When you launched the missile to kill me back then, you risked everything and wanted me to die a horrible death." Yixian smiled cruelly. "Yixian, what do you want?" Nangong Tian was almost driven crazy by Yixian's torture. He was extremely regretful now. If he knew that this would happen, he wouldn't have provoked Yixian. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. Even though Nangong Tian was extremely regretful now, the reality he was facing was telling him that his family members could die in Yixian's hands at any moment. "I want you to appear in front of me within 10 minutes. Otherwise, I'll kill one person every minute. If I don't see you in 10 minutes, everyone in the Nangong family will die too." Yixian's voice was very calm, but Nangong Tian felt a chill down his spine when he heard it. "You can't go. If you go, you'll die too." The grim-faced man suddenly appeared beside Nangong Tian and said in an extremely gloomy voice. How could Nangong Tian not know what would happen if he appeared in front of Yixian? However, everyone in the Nangong family was in Yixian's hands. If he really didn't follow Yixian's orders, all of them would die in Yixian's hands. 1 minute has passed. All of a sudden, Yixian's calm voice came from the video call. Nangong Tian immediately woke up from his thoughts and looked at the video call. "Ah!" A terrified female voice sounded out. Yixian slowly walked over to a middle-aged lady. A strange smile appeared on his face as he looked at Nangong Tian Dao. "This is your wife, right?" No, I beg." Unfortunately, without waiting for Nangong Tian to plead, a ruthless expression flashed through Yixian's eyes. When he slashed out with his sword, a mournful bloody light blossomed, and a headless corpse collapsed at his feet. "Mother! Aunt! Sister!" Many sorrowful cries could be heard from the video call. Nangong Tian collapsed to the ground as he witnessed this scene. A mouthful of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Clearly, it was caused by excessive grief. "You beast! Nangong Tian's mouth was stained with blood and his voice was hoarse and trembling. Chapter 93. Thud thud thud. Yixian held the Nangong family tree in his hands as he slowly walked forward until he arrived beside a young man. The bloodthirsty demon sword was pressed against the young man's chest. He turned around to look at Nangong Tian in the video and said, "Nangong Shu, your third son, he's the next to die. Turn off the video and leave Xia country immediately." The masked man's body tensed up when he saw Yixian's horrifying methods and roared at Nangong Tian. Unfortunately, Nangong Tian was already in endless pain. He ignored the warning of the masked man and begged Yi Xian, No, I'll go and see you immediately. Time's up. Yi Xian's voice was very calm, but it meant the death of a life. Dad, save me, save me. I don't want to die, poof. The sword pierced through his heart and blood splattered everywhere. Before Nangong Shu could finish his sentence, he fell to the ground and turned into a cold corpse. His eyes were wide open and he was looking at Nangong Tian through the video call. Son, my son. Nangong Tian was in tears and he couldn't stop crying. You still have 8 minutes, you can continue crying, Yi Xian said calmly and walked towards a young woman. She was Nangong Tian's second daughter. Oh, I'll go and see you now. Nangong Tian was driven crazy by Yi Xian. He yelled at the pilot, take off immediately. Crack. Suddenly, the masked man crushed Nangong Tian's phone and glared at Nangong Tian. You idiot, even if you go, not only will you die, but your Nangong family will also die. Get lost, get lost. Do you know that even if I'm still alive, I'm already old and can't have children anymore? If they're all dead, what's the point of me living alone in this world? Nangong Tian roared as he trembled. I'm begging you, please help me this time. This is the password of the Nangong family's overseas bank. I'll give you all of my assets, just help me this time. Nangong Tian took out a black card and begged continuously. The masked man clenched his fists as he looked at Nangong Tian, who was in tears. His eyes were extremely gloomy. He took a deep look at Nangong Tian, took the black card and said to the pilot, send him to the Nangong family. Following the masked man's command, the helicopter slowly rose into the air and headed straight for the Nangong family. Boss, he will definitely die this time. He will definitely expose our whereabouts, a foreign man said worriedly. Ghostface looked at the helicopter that Nangong Tian was in and asked, do you know who's the scariest? Boss, what are you talking about? The foreign man asked in confusion. There are 2 types of people in this world that are the scariest. The first type is people who are righteous and have no regrets even if they die. The second type is people who are cold-blooded and heartless. They will do anything to achieve their goals. Even if they kill everyone in the world, they won't feel guilty at all. Yi Xian is this type of person. He's the scariest. I think we've offended someone that we shouldn't have. The ghost-faced man's voice was extremely bitter, and his aura was slightly dispirited. He believed that he was also a ruthless person, but compared to Yi Xian, he was nothing more than a minor character. Tell everyone that we can't stay in this base any longer. Order everyone to retreat to the second base. The masked man woke up from his bitter state of mind and gave the order to the foreign man. Yes, boss. The foreign man took the order and left. However, the masked man looked in the direction of the Nangong family and was in a daze. At the Nangong family, there was a strong smell of blood in the air and 6 to 7 corpses were lying on the ground. Extreme fear spread throughout the Nangong family. Just as Yi Xian said, Nangong Tian would kill 1 person for every minute that he delayed. After all, Yi Xian believed that he was a man of his words. Initially, the Nangong family members were screaming and cursing, but now they were dead silent. Everyone's eyes were filled with fear and despair. This was because Yi Xian was no longer a human in their eyes. He was a cold-blooded and cruel demon. Daddy, I'm scared. A young child's voice was heard. The child was curled up in Nangong Ming's arms and didn't dare to look at Yi Xian's face. Don't be scared, don't be scared. Your grandfather will come and save us soon. Nangong Ming comforted the child with a trembling voice. However, he was obviously not confident and there was despair in his eyes. Looking at this scene, Yi Xian's expression didn't change. However, his eyes were as deep as an ancient pond as he strolled towards Nangong Ming and his son. Little kid, come, let uncle hug you. Yi Xian, don't touch my son. Nangong Ming screamed in fear. He hugged the child tightly and refused to let go. Unfortunately, Nangong Ming was only a mortal. How could he resist Yi Xian? Under Yi Xian's cold gaze, Nangong Ming snatched the child from Nangong Ming's hands. Boo-hoo! Bad guy, let go of me. Let go of me. The child cried loudly and kicked Yi Xian continuously. Obviously, he was frightened by Yi Xian's actions. Little kid, tell uncle, what's your name? Yi Xian smiled warmly, but in the eyes of the child, It caused his face to turn deathly pale. His body that was constantly kicking also calmed down. My name is Nangongji," the child replied with a trembling voice. Yixian nodded slowly. His gaze became even more profound. It was unknown if he was talking to the child or himself. He said, "I have a story. Do you want to hear it?" Without waiting for the child's reply, Yixian seemed to have sunk into reminiscence. His voice gradually became low and deep. Once upon a time there was a child. His family was very poor. When he was 5 years old, he lost his father. He and his mother relied on each other for survival. On this day, it was the child's 6th birthday. His mother bought a fish and specially made his favorite, braised carp, to celebrate his birthday. On this day, the child was very happy. He ate the fish in large mouthfuls until there was only a pile of fish bones left. Only then did he burp in satisfaction. However, when he walked into the kitchen, he saw his mother quietly eating his leftover fish bones. Listening to Yixian's story, the child temporarily forgot his fear. He asked curiously, and then, Yixian's eyes were absent-minded. He continued, after half a year in the dead of winter, under the attack of the wind and snow, the child wore a single layer of clothing and stood guard at the entrance of a restaurant. He watched as a bully ate the fish on the table with big mouthfuls. His eyes were filled with envy. A braised carp was quickly finished by the bully. The bully did not pay and was sent off by the boss flatteringly. However, the child looked at the remaining fish bones and was unwilling to leave. After a great deal of hesitation, he finally ran into the restaurant and stole the plate of fish bones. However, he was discovered by the boss and was beaten black and blue. Why did he steal someone else's leftovers? The child asked suspiciously. Because today is his mother's birthday. Yixian said in a low voice. "Ah." Listening to Yixian's story, the child exclaimed in surprise. His eyes were filled with anger. He said, "That boss is so mean." After being scolded and beaten, the boss left. The child finally managed to protect the fish bones in his arms. Enduring the pain all over his body, he brought them home for his mother to eat. However, from that day onwards, the child understood a principle. Humans can only survive in this cruel world by being strong. The weak will be beaten mercilessly like he is today. Yixian finished his story at this point. However, the indifferent and emotionless aura around him became stronger. Uncle, are you that child?" The child asked in a trembling voice. He seemed to have understood something. Unfortunately, Yixian did not answer the child's question. He gently placed the child in front of Nangongming and said in a low voice, "Your childhood was undoubtedly happy. However, your Nangong family offended someone you should not have offended." Chapter 94. In the distant horizon, the sound of a propeller could be heard. A helicopter flew across the sky and landed on the Nangong family's lawn. The door of the helicopter opened and Nangong Tian staggered out of the helicopter. He knelt down on the ground and tears flowed out of his eyes when he saw the 6 to 7 cold corpses on the ground. "Yixian, I'm here. Kill me if you want, but please spare my family's lives." There was no roaring or hysteria. Nangong Tian had even forgotten about the blood feud in front of him. He knelt down and kowtowed to Yixian, hoping that Yixian would be merciful and spare his family's lives. Clang! Blood swords filled the sky and killing intent filled the air. Under Nangong Tian's hopeless gaze, Yixian slashed and more than 10 people from the Nangong family died on the spot. Blood, the beautiful blood stained the ground and screams of despair could be heard. Why? Nangong Tian roared when he saw what was happening. He had never seen such a crazy person who could be so ruthless to the elderly, the weak, the women and the children. The reason is simple. If I was killed by the missile that day, would you have spared my family's lives? Yixian walked forward slowly with the bloodthirsty demon sword in his hand. A life disappeared with every step he took. The blood splattered everywhere and the beautiful sword aura proved that Yixian had turned into the Azura Grim Reaper without any human emotions. The strong will always be strong while the weak will always be like dogs. As the head of the Nangong family, there must be many people who have died directly or indirectly in your hands. You should understand such a simple logic better than me. Blood spread and a vicious aura surrounded Yixian. When Yixian arrived in front of Nangong Tian, all the people from the Nangong family had turned into cold corpses except for Nangong Ming and his son. Yixian, I'll eat your flesh and drink your blood even if I turn into a ferocious ghost. Nangong Tian's face was twisted and ferocious, as if he was a demon that had crawled out of hell. Remember, don't meet me in your next life. Otherwise, you will still die without a burial ground. Yixian said indifferently. The bloodthirsty demon sword slashed down, and sword chi filled the sky as it shot out. Amidst Nangong Tian's miserable howls, it directly turned into a rain of blood that fell onto the ground. Dad! Grandpa! Nangong Ming and his son burst into tears. As they looked at Yixian's back, their eyes were filled with extreme hatred. He abruptly turned around without any ripples. Yixian slowly walked towards Nangong Ming and his son. When he arrived beside them, Yixian calmly slit Nangong Ming's throat, causing him to die in despair. Uncle, don't kill me. Please, I beg you. The child cried out as he stumbled backward. Looking at the child in front of him, Yixian's expression was calm as he said in a gentle voice, Child, do you still remember the story I told you just now? Yes. The child said with a trembling voice, There is no right or wrong in this world. There is only the strong and the weak. You were wrongly born in the Nangong family in this life. I hope that you can live a peaceful life in your next life. A flash of sword light pierced through the child's heart. A drop of blood splattered on Yixian's face. He did not wipe it off. Instead, he looked up at the moon in the sky with an indescribable loneliness in his eyes. Yixian asked himself, Why do I feel so terrible when I killed the 6 desires merciless today? Do I pity this child? Or do I feel compassion in my heart? Just a little. Yixian could feel that he almost did not have the heart to kill him just now. Is this an inner demon? Yixian mumbled to himself, but if it is an inner demon, why do I not have any signs of qi deviation? Yixian did not understand. Yixian's consciousness was very clear. He knew that when he stepped onto the path of immortal cultivators, he would have to experience endless slaughter. Today he had only massacred a family, but it made him feel somewhat gloomy. This kind of situation had never happened to him before. I have long since abandoned the so-called compassion. If I had compassion, I would have only become a corpse under the feet of others on this unrivaled path. I don't kill people, but people want to kill me. As the saying goes, revenge breeds revenge. When will there ever be an end to it? Massacring a family today is the best choice I have made. The 6 desires merciless, heaven and earth have no heart. Yixian finally calmed his surging emotions. He took a step forward and disappeared from where he stood. However, at this moment, the Nangong family was engulfed in a monstrous fire. In the capital, the people were in a state of panic. When they woke up in the morning, the citizens of the capital all asked about what happened last night. However, due to the martial law of the Wuhan Bureau, not a single piece of information was leaked. As time passed, this matter was gradually suppressed. At the same time, the news of the Nangong family's destruction also spread to the upper echelons of the capital. No one knew who did it until Yixian appeared in front of everyone. Many of the upper echelons of the capital were shocked. They did not know how Yixian managed to survive these technological weapons. In the courtyard house in the capital, Yixian sat on a rocking chair while Ling Long and Tai Li stood on his left and right. Qing Long was constantly reporting something to Yixian. Mr. Yi, all the henchmen of the Nangong family have been eliminated. However, we can't find out where the masked man is. It's okay. He will surface sooner or later. It won't be too far away, Yixian said calmly. When he killed Nangong Tian, Yixian already knew that even if he forced Nangong Tian to tell him where the masked man was, the masked man would be gone by the time he went to find him. Why bother? Although Yixian did not know where the masked man was, he already had some guesses in his heart. Since this person had been hiding in the capital all this time, he could not be a nobody. Furthermore, in Yixian's heart, he had already sentenced this person to death. This was because as long as they were his enemies, they would only end up dead. Mr. Yi, there's one more thing. Right now, all the major families and some ancient martial artists want to visit you. Do you want to see them? Qinglong probed. Obviously, the battle between Yixian and Li Huantian had completely established Yixian's reputation. Whether it was the upper echelons of the capital or the ancient martial artists, they were all deeply respectful of Yixian. Naturally, they wanted to get closer to him. I like peace and quiet. Tell them not to bother me. I understand. Qinglong nodded as if he had already guessed Yixian's attitude. Qinglong, help me arrange something. I want to see Xuejie alone. As Yixian finished speaking, Qinglong was stunned. He looked at Yixian with a slightly strange expression. He also looked troubled. If it were someone else, Qinglong would definitely agree. However, this Lady Xuejie's identity was not simple. Even the big shots attached great importance to her. If Yixian had a conflict with this Lady Xuejie, things would be a little difficult to handle. Mr. Yi, I'll do my best. As for whether Lady Xuejie will see you or not, I can't guarantee it, Qinglong said slightly uneasily. Ha! A strange and inexplicable look flashed across Yixian's eyes. He murmured, she will see me. I'm afraid she's already prepared. For some reason, Qinglong's body suddenly tensed up when he saw Yixian's appearance. A feeling of uneasiness appeared in his heart. He could only smile flatteringly and forcefully suppress this uneasiness. However, he kept praying in his heart that Yixian would not do anything out of line to Xuejie. Chapter 95. Heaven and earth were boundless, and the universe was vast. In the long river of history, humans were never alone. Many unknown existences had witnessed this vast history with humans. Immortals, demons, and devils. These were 5 different life forms. Not to mention the other forms, just the legend of demons had been passed down since ancient times. It could be said that it had always been a hot topic in people's mouths. Everything had spirits, and heaven and earth were born. No matter if it was grass, trees, mountains, rocks, birds, or beasts, if they could gain intelligence, they could gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and absorb the essence of the sun and moon. These life forms also had a common name, demons. In the suburbs of the capital, in the nameless mountain range. It was the beginning of spring, and everything was recovering. The mountain was covered in lush green vegetation, giving people a feeling of prosperity. A cool breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of plants. Above the mountain peak, a sea of clouds lingered. A bamboo forest swayed in the clouds, and a simple stone house stood in the middle of the bamboo forest. It made people feel as if they were in a fairyland. In the stone house, Xuejie was dressed in a white palace gauze, and her hair was tied into a bun. Her lips were bright red, and there was a cinnabar dot between her eyebrows. She gave people an extremely stunning and cold temperament. Dong! The sound of the zither was like water, and it was like the sound of a fairy. After the ancient fairy tune was played, Xuejie's hands left the zither, and for the first time, she looked at the person in front of her. Mr. Yi, although I am the leader of the desolate group, I have always lived in seclusion deep in the mountains. I rarely pay attention to the trivial matters of the mortal world. Why do you have to force me? Xuejie's beauty could be described as a peerless beauty. She was looking at Yixian pitifully, giving people an impulse to hold her in their arms and protect her. Unfortunately, Yixian was not moved. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only indifference in his eyes when he looked at Xuejie. Humans have their own ways, demons have their own ways. Your bewitching trick may work on others, but to me, you are just showing off your slight skill in front of an expert. Yixian smiled contemptuously. When he opened and closed his eyes, the terrifying bloody light seemed to solidify, and the surrounding void faintly sounded with the cries of dead souls. An extremely terrifying evil aura suppressed Xuejie. Bang! The wooden zither exploded, and the void exploded. The snow girl's expression changed slightly. A dim light flashed on her body, and she disappeared from the stone house in an eerie manner. Mr. Yi, I have no intention of becoming your enemy, but I'm not afraid of you. Xuejie's tender voice resounded from all directions in the void. It contained a faint trace of anger. Wisps of white smoke rose from the stone house and instantly engulfed Yixian. You dare to take out a mere spirit-trapping array to embarrass yourself? Yixian laughed coldly. When he struck out with his palm, the entire stone house exploded. A slender figure let out a muffled groan and fled out of the stone house. You want to leave? Yixian narrowed his eyes. His two sword fingers slashed through the air, seemingly crossing the barrier of time and space. He slashed out a resplendent sword qi, which immediately caused Shui to cry out in pain. Buzz! Yixian suddenly appeared in the middle of the bamboo forest. His sparkling and translucent jade-like palm directly grabbed onto Shuiji's pure white neck. When his eyes opened and closed, a sinister killing intent emerged. Little beast, you've only just entered the Foundation establishment realm. You want to fight against me? If you tell me the secret of turning into a demon, I'll let you live. If you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for destroying your body and soul, so that you'll never be reincarnated. Yixian was domineering, violent, and unreasonable. He directly used his strength to suppress her. He had no pity for her at all. You really are a cultivator. Shuiji's face turned red, and her voice trembled. Yixian wasn't surprised that Shuiji had seen through his identity. After all, the other party's life force was that of a demon and had a sharp intuition towards cultivators. Yixian didn't even think of hiding himself in front of Shuiji. Tell me, why can you turn into a demon? How many demon clans are there in this world? Yixian said in an icy voice. Let go of me. I'll tell you, Shuiji said with difficulty. That's right. As long as you're obedient, I won't hurt you. Yixian let go of Shuiji and gently helped her tidy up her wrinkled gauze. The warm smile on his face was very amiable. However, when Shuiji saw this, she felt a chill run down her spine. She stepped back and kept a safe distance from Yixian. Temperamental, vicious, and ruthless. These were the feelings that Yixian gave her. When facing someone like Yixian, although Shuiji was a demon, she was clearly afraid of Yixian. After hesitating for a long time, Shuiji's expression kept changing, as if she was hesitating about something. During this time, Yixian didn't disturb him in the slightest. He believed that Shuiji would give him a satisfactory answer. Come with me. After a dozen breaths of time, Shuiji's expression became firm as if she had made a decision. She walked towards the cliff. Yixian slowly followed behind her. A sea of clouds curled around the peak of the mountain. Further ahead was a bottomless abyss. Shuiji did not stop. She directly leapt into the air and jumped down the cliff. Such a scene made Yixian narrow his eyes. Could this woman's secret be at the bottom of the cliff? Without the slightest hesitation or fear of any traps, Yixian took a step forward and dove down towards the bottom of the cliff. At the bottom of the cliff, an old cave was firmly blocked by a huge rock. When Shuiji moved the huge rock away, a wisp of spiritual light suddenly gushed out from the cave, causing Yixian's eyes to be stunned. A strange expression flashed through his eyes. Mr. Yi, please. Under Shui's guidance, the two of them directly entered the cave. There was a completely different world within the cave. When the two of them went deep into the belly of the mountain, a clear spring water with a faint amount of spirit energy was directly reflected in Yixian's eyes. Breathing in the thin amount of spirit energy, Yixian immediately felt refreshed. His cultivation even faintly showed signs of fluctuation. Mr. Yi, I was originally a white lotus in this spiritual spring. Because I absorbed the spiritual qi in the spring water, it took me 500 years to turn into a demon. This is my secret, Shuiji said sincerely. Hearing Shuiji's words, Yixian slowly walked until he came to the side of the spiritual spring. When he inhaled and exhaled, an extremely thin spiritual qi was sucked into his mouth and nose. When Shuiji saw this scene, she immediately felt a pain in her heart. However, she did not dare to say anything. It really is a spiritual spring. Unfortunately, this spiritual spring is just a drop in the bucket for me. Yixian closed his eyes and felt it. When he opened his eyes, a trace of disappointment appeared in his eyes. Perhaps some people would ask why Yixian forced Shuiji to reveal the secret of her demon transformation. In fact, Yixian's purpose was to find the source of the spiritual qi, in hopes of improving his cultivation. One must know that Yixian was able to become an immortal cultivator, because he cultivated the immortal scripture, and experienced 4 years of bloody battles in the Blood Sea battlefield. Only then did he have the cultivation of the crossing calamity stage. By absorbing the blood soul essence, his cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. This kind of cultivation speed was 1 in a billion in the legendary Earth Immortal world, let alone in the world of Dharma ending. struggling between life and death and recovering from death. No one understood the meaning of life better than Yi Xian. Not only did he want to live well, but he also had a great ambition in his heart. He wanted to become an immortal in the boundless secular world. Chapter 96. Why did the Bloodsea battlefield exist? What was the cause of the ancient war? Who was Yuan Mo? What did Yuan Ling and the Bloodsea Phantom want from him? Was the legendary Earth God's realm really behind that door? There was a thick fog in front of him, full of unknowns and uncertainties. Yi Xian was not arrogant enough to think that he was the protagonist of heaven and earth, nor did he have any so-called luck. Perhaps if he made a mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation and never be reincarnated. This was definitely not something that Yi Xian wanted to see. Perhaps some people had forgotten that Yi Xian was ruthless, insidious, and gave people a sense of maturity. However, he was only 18 years old this year. Other people grew up happily under the protection of their parents at the age of 18, but Yi Xian embarked on a path full of blood and thorns at the age of 18. This path was rugged and difficult, but it was Yi Xian's only choice. This was because Yi Xian did not want to die. He just wanted to live well. When he slaughtered the Nangong family, Yi Xian killed the last child, and there was a wave in his heart. This was clearly a sign that his inner demon was about to arise. Yi Xian had never experienced such a thing. Logically speaking, Yi Xian's cultivation was obtained by devouring blood souls and essence. Under the effect of the Immortal Sutra, he reached the tribulation stage and did not need much spirit qi. However, there were gains and losses in this world. Although his cultivation had increased rapidly, it was also because there was no spirit qi in his body to suppress it. When his inner demon came, there would be a great change. Mr. Yi Xian, the spirit spring will dry up in 3 years. If you want to take it, I can give it to you. Seeing that Yi Xian was silent, Xueji spoke up at the right time to test him. Yi Xian returned from his thoughts and looked at Xueji with an increasingly deep gaze. This made Xueji's body tense up, and she felt extremely nervous. No need. Suddenly turning around, Yi Xian floated away. This also made Xueji feel relieved. However, looking at Yi Xian's back, a strange look flashed across her eyes. Wang! The spring water rippled, and the spiritual energy rose. The snow girl shook her body and turned into a white lotus, taking root in the center of the spiritual spring. The whole stone cave fell into silence. Separated by the heavens and earth, it was impervious to all magic. As a cultivator in the crossing calamity realm, Yi Xian could easily cover his tracks. He blended into the void and returned directly. When he saw the snow girl's original white lotus form, a strange bloody light flashed across his eyes. That's right, Yi Xian had no intention of leaving because he didn't trust Xueji from the very beginning. As an immortal cultivator, Yi Xian might not have come into contact with spiritual energy, but he knew some common sense. The spiritual energy in the spring water was extremely thin. How could Xueji transform into a human in merely 500 years? Yi Xian was very sure that Xueji had an expert guiding her from behind, and this person was the key to turning her into a demon. Yi Xian was never short of patience. He sat cross-legged in the void and looked at the white lotus in the spring water calmly, quietly waiting for the person behind the snow girl to appear. Time passed quickly and 7 days passed. Ripples appeared in the spring water, and the white lotus turned into Xueji. She walked out of the cave slowly without making contact with anyone. Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as he looked at everything before him. He couldn't help but ask himself, could it be that he'd guessed wrongly? Wait. Yi Xian trusted his intuition. He believed that there must be a big problem in this important place. It was just that he hadn't discovered it yet. The sun rose and the moon set. Time passed day by day in a cycle. Xue either cultivated in the stone cave or went back to the bamboo forest to play the zither. Other than that, she didn't do anything unusual. This state lasted for a whole month. After such a long time, Yi Xian began to have doubts in his heart. Was I too suspicious and this woman didn't lie to me? On this day, Xueji appeared in the stone cave again with an extremely solemn expression. She had set up many spiritual formations around the spring water. When Yi Xian saw this scene, his eyes suddenly lit up. He knew that he hadn't guessed wrong. This Xueji was indeed strange. Master! Shui knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the void. Buzz! The void rippled and a white-robed Confucian scholar appeared, floating up and down in the void. I didn't expect that there would be cultivators in this world. Fortunately, my primordial spirit scattered into the void. Otherwise, if it was discovered by him, I'm afraid there would be unexpected problems. The white-robed Confucian scholar sighed. Master, you ordered me to stay in the room for a month. Was it to prevent this person from returning? Shui asked. You've just entered the foundation establishment stage. How could you understand the horror of cultivators? Although I can't see through this person's cultivation, I'm sure he's spying on you in the dark. As the saying goes, it's better to be safe than sorry. After a month, he should have already left, the white-robed Confucian scholar said with certainty. Unfortunately, if the two of them knew that Yixian hadn't left and had been waiting here for a whole month, what would they think? In the void, Yixian sat cross-legged and looked indifferently at the white-robed Confucian scholar. A strange light kept flickering in his eyes. Primordial spirit? Yixian believed that he hadn't seen wrong. This white-robed Confucian scholar was indeed the primordial spirit of a cultivator. However, he had lost his physical body and was struggling at death's door because of this pool of spiritual spring water. Master, you once said that without the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, cultivators couldn't exist in this world. Why isn't this person affected? Shui asked. The white-robed Confucian scholar's body was illusory, but when he opened and closed his eyes, there was excitement in them. This person's cultivation is extremely high, but he's been haunted by vengeful souls and there's no spiritual qi in his body. If I'm not wrong, his cultivation is obtained by devouring the blood and qi of living creatures. It's similar to the blood and qi transportation method I created years ago. Clap, clap, clap. All of a sudden, a burst of applause came, and the two of them changed their expressions greatly. They looked toward the source of the sound. The air stirred and the void changed. Under the two's horrified gazes, Yixian revealed himself and looked at the white-robed Confucian scholar with a smile. I've always believed that this world is very, very big. In the vast river of history, there are always some peerless geniuses who stand out and amaze all living things and become the protagonists of an era. After Yixian said this, he paused for a moment. His voice was strange as he said, I presume you're one of them, right? Time seemed to stop and space seemed to be frozen. When Yixian's appearance came into their eyes, Shui's face was pale and her soul seemed to have left her body. The white-robed Confucian scholar's face was bitter, and there was a touch of despair in his eyes. Yixian, don't mess around. All of a sudden, the solemn atmosphere was broken. Shui instantly stood in front of the white-robed Confucian scholar and looked at Yixian with a desperate look. Chapter 97. Shuiji, you may leave now. The white-robed Confucian said bitterly, which startled Shuiji. She said, Master Yu? If Brother Yi wanted to harm us, would you and I still be in one piece? You may leave now. The white-robed Confucian smiled bitterly. I'm Lu Bai. Nice to meet you, Brother Yi. The white-robed Confucian walked forward and bowed to Yixian. His way of bowing was very old-fashioned. Obviously, he was not from this era. Lu Bai? Yixian murmured to himself. A thought flashed through his mind. Isn't this the name of the Taoist genius from Mount Longhu? At the Table family's villa, Yixian used a soul-searching technique on Elder Ghost. From his memories, he found out that a Taoist genius had once appeared in Mount Longhu and created the blood qi transfer technique. As for the name of this Taoist genius, he was called Lu Bai. Brother Yi, have you heard of my name? Lu Bai asked curiously. In the end of the world, there was no spiritual qi. 500 years ago, a Taoist genius appeared in Mount Longhu. He took a different path and cultivated both Taoist and martial arts. He even created the blood and qi transfer method, wanting to recreate the golden age of cultivation. This person you are you, right? Yixian slowly spoke. Lu Bai's face was filled with astonishment. In the end, his face was filled with bitterness as he said, the world deified me, but in the end my body withered and my primordial spirit left my body. The so-called great Tao of immortal cultivation is just a delusion. Lu Bai paused for a moment and continued, but I didn't expect Brother Yi to be so scheming. You actually waited here for more than a month for me to appear. Yixian smiled and said, in fact, I'm not sure if Shueji has a master behind her, but now it seems that my guess is very correct. The two of them asked and answered each other. They seemed to be very harmonious. They even called each other brothers, as if they were close friends who had not seen each other for many years. However, in Lu Bai's eyes, he was already prepared to die. This was because he was also a cultivator before his death. Although he was only in the golden core stage, he knew what would happen when a cultivator's primordial spirit was exposed in front of another cultivator. Even in the legendary Earth Immortal world, the primordial spirit of an immortal cultivator was a great supplement. Lu Bai knew very well that Yixian would never let him go. Brother Yi, a straightforward person doesn't resort to insinuations. Since I've been exposed to you, I also know what kind of fate I'll face. I only ask that you let Shueji go and let her go. Lu Bai bowed and said. Yixian could completely sense the other's despair. This also caused him to smile warmly, and he said, Your nascent spirit is indeed a great tonic, but it is completely useless to me. Also, you may have misunderstood. I waited for you to appear this time just to ask Brother Lu some questions. Looking at the warm smile on Yixian's face, Lu Bai did not dare to treat Yixian as a kind person. After hearing about Yixian's deeds from Shueji, Lu Bai deeply understood that the person in front of him was an extremely sinister and ruthless person. If he treated him as a kind person, he would not even know how he died. I wonder what Brother Yi wants to ask? Lu Bai cautiously asked. Buzz. Yixian's palm and fingers were like clouds, and a gentle breeze brushed past his face. With a slap, Shueji fainted directly on the ground. This also caused Lu Bai's expression to change greatly. The spiritual light around his body instantly surged, and his eyes were extremely cold as he looked at Yixian. Don't worry, I didn't hurt her. I just made her sleep for a while, Yixian said calmly. Brother Yi, what do you want to do? Lu Bai's expression was complicated. He completely could not understand what Yixian was thinking. Boom! Like a thunderclap from the ninth heaven, and like the humming of the luminous stars, Yixian suddenly released an extremely terrifying aura. The blood-red light around his body continued to boil, and Lu Bai's expression changed greatly. He staggered back and looked at Yixian with an unprecedented horror. You? What is your cultivation level? Lu Bai asked in a trembling voice. Yixian's blood-red eyes were as if they were solid. His voice rumbled in Lu Bai's ears. Immortal cultivators cultivate their fate and go against the heavens. As the saying goes, there are 9 heavens in the path of immortality, and each step leads to a new heaven. I am standing at the 8th heaven. What do you think my cultivation level is? Cross calamity stage? Lu Bai trembled as he muttered to himself. However, he immediately refuted Yixian with a roar. No, impossible. Not to mention that it is the end of the world. Even if the world was perfect, you are so young, it is impossible for you to enter the cross-calamity stage. Buzz. It was as if the stars were falling, as if the sun and moon were hanging upside down. The void was shaking and blood was bursting out. An extremely terrifying thing happened. Yixian's glabella was glowing, and the wailing of dead souls was heard from the void. A 3-inch man walked out from his glabella, and a destructive aura burst out. Lu Bai was paralyzed on the ground as if he was scared out of his wits. Cross-calamity stage immortal soul. Is this the cross-calamity stage immortal soul mentioned in the ancient records? Lu Bai murmured in a trembling voice. If he had not seen this scene with his own eyes, he would not have believed that he had seen something from the legends. High in the sky in the void, Yixian was sitting cross-legged. A cool breeze blew, causing his black hair to flutter in the wind, giving him an elegant and otherworldly feeling. Is the inner demon tribulation really so terrifying? Yixian murmured in a low voice. It had been 5 days since Yixian and Lu Bai parted ways. Recalling the conversation between the two, Yixian frowned deeply. When Lu Bai learned that Yixian was at the cross-calamity stage, he was so scared that he fell to the ground. He finally understood why Yixian did not care about his vital spirit. After the initial panic, Lu Bai finally showed his talent. He discussed Dao with Yixian for 3 days and 3 nights. Both of them could be said to have gained a lot. Yixian deeply understood that although his cultivation was strong, and he was only one step away from becoming an immortal, he was not as knowledgeable as Lu Bai about the most basic immortal cultivation theory. Lu Bai was different. When he was alive, he was a Taoist genius of Mount Longhu. 500 years after his death, his vital spirit remained in the world and he studied immortal cultivation day and night. He could answer many of Yixian's questions about immortal cultivation. Moreover, Yixian was not stupid enough to return to the Bloodsea battlefield and ask Yuan Ling about his own problems. After all, the two were enemies, not friends. Sooner or later, a great battle would break out. Yixian was not arrogant, and he was not ashamed to ask for advice. He did not look down on Lu Bai because of his weak cultivation. It was also because of Yixian's attitude that Lu Bai was moved to be able to get a dignified tribulation stage cultivator to consult him. Just this kind of honor was enough to wake Lu Bai up with a smile even in his sleep. When Yixian mentioned the breeding of inner demons, Lu Bai directly answered him. He had once read in an ancient book that in the distant past, there were devil cultivators who killed a lot of people. Their bodies were surrounded by resentful souls. When the inner demons broke out, they would face the danger of death. There were only 3 ways to solve the inner demons. The first was to find a spiritual treasure to suppress the inner demons. The second was to practice the Buddhist art of exorcism. Naturally, the inner demons would not breed. However, these 2 methods had a great drawback. That was, one's cultivation would be stagnant, and there would be no possibility of further progress in one's life. Naturally, these 2 methods were not within Yixian's scope of consideration. Chapter 98. As for the third method, it was to rely on oneself to overcome the inner demon tribulation. If one could overcome it, one's cultivation would improve qualitatively. If one failed to overcome it, one would naturally die and not even have the chance to reincarnate. Yixian was not depressed when he heard this answer from Lu Bai. Since he already knew that the inner demon tribulation was unavoidable, Yixian could only face it calmly. He also believed that he could overcome this tribulation with his own perseverance. In the past 3 days, Yixian and Lu Bai talked a lot, and also vaguely mentioned the matter of becoming an immortal. According to Lu Bai's inference, Yixian had already embarked on the path of devouring blood and qi. Although this kind of cultivation method was extremely fast, the drawbacks were also very obvious. Because Yixian had killed too many people, the vengeful spirits around him were wrapped in a vicious aura. When Yixian broke through to the tribulation transcendence stage, these vengeful spirits would probably erupt together and usher in the most terrifying heavenly tribulation in history. Lu Bai was indeed a genius of Taoism. He told Yixian that although he had lost his physical body, he had studied the way of immortality day and night for the past 500 years. He had also created a set of formation that could conceal the mysteries of heaven. Perhaps it could help Yixian when he crossed the immortal tribulation. However, this set of formation was still in its embryonic form. As long as he was given another 10 years, Lu Bai guaranteed that he could perfect it. In exchange, Lu Bai's request was very simple. He hoped that Yixian could find a suitable physical body for him, and let him reappear in the world again. This condition could be said to be simple, but it was also very difficult. In order to find a suitable physical body, one had to be at the golden core stage to accommodate Lu Bai's primordial spirit. But how could there be a golden core stage cultivator in this world? The sun rose and the moon set, and the stars moved. Yixian woke up from his thoughts and waved away his troubled thoughts. When he opened and closed his eyes, a touch of blood flashed across his eyes. He quickly made a decision in his heart. Lu Bai's talent was peerless, and he would definitely be of great use to him. From the way he talked, it could be seen that he was a person who was infatuated with immortal cultivation and had extraordinary talent in immortal cultivation. In the future, he would be a great help to him. Of course, although Yixian thought highly of this person, he was extremely suspicious. Naturally, he would not completely trust Lu Bai. Before he left, he even planted a blood talisman in this person's body. With just a thought, he could destroy this person's soul. It's time to go back. Yixian stood up in the air. When he took a step forward, he turned into a streak of blood-red light and shot towards the capital. Capital city, a courtyard house. Yi Xian stood in front of the gate, his expression extremely gloomy. This courtyard house was his residence in the capital. But what did Yi Xian see now? 2 wreaths were placed in front of the gate, and a large memorial character was pasted on the iron gate. There was also a pair of elegiac couplets hanging on both sides of the gate. It was obvious that someone in the family had passed away. But Yi Xian's family was all in Jiangnan, and this courtyard house was only his temporary residence. Who would be so bold as to mess with him? Yi Xian's expression was gloomy. He strode forward and pushed open the iron gate. As the iron gate was pushed open, Yi Xian looked around. The courtyard was filled with yellow paper money, and there were white paper dolls everywhere. It gave off an extremely gloomy feeling. Ignoring these depressing things, Yi Xian stepped into the main hall. But when he entered the main hall, a brand new memorial tablet came into view. This also made Yi Xian's expression freeze. He stared at the few large words on the memorial tablet as if he could not take his eyes off it. The memorial tablet was inscribed with a few large words. Beloved daughter, Yiling or mother, Han Qiuyun. Impossible. Yi Xian stared at the memorial tablet in front of him. His voice was extremely cold. When he opened and closed his eyes, an extremely terrifying blood-red light spread out, and the surrounding void rippled. The scene in front of him caused Yi Xian's mind to fluctuate greatly. He could not believe what he was seeing. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian gradually came back to his senses. He quickly took out his phone and pressed the power button until the phone screen lit up. Hundreds of missed calls and text messages appeared before his eyes. Mother Yi, Qinglong, Xia Qingzhu, Yun Mingyao, and many unknown numbers. Looking at the missed calls on his phone, Yi Xian's expression became even gloomier. The blood-red light around him could not be controlled, and a great sense of uneasiness rose in his heart. It had been 2 months since Yi Xian left the capital. During this period of time, in order to not be disturbed by outsiders, Yi Xian turned off his phone. But when he returned to the capital again, he encountered such a strange situation. He quickly opened the unread messages. When the messages were reflected in Yi Xian's eyes, an extremely terrifying blood-red light shot out in all directions with Yi Xian as the center. Rumble! The earth shook violently, and the surrounding houses collapsed instantly as if a magnitude 10 earthquake had occurred. Boom! The sound of a sky-high explosion came, as if the waves of the vast sea were surging. Yi Xian's face was ferocious. He turned into a blood-red cloud and rushed directly into the sky, disappearing from the destroyed courtyard house. Yi family ancestral home inner hall. A crystal coffin was placed in the middle of the inner hall. Yi Ling seemed to be asleep as she lay quietly in the crystal coffin, as if she would never wake up. Around the inner hall, the father and son of the Yi family were full of worry. Qinglong was beside Mother Yi, and his expression was extremely gloomy. Only Mother Ye's eyes were lifeless, as if she had become a walking corpse. Her 2 eyes stared blankly at Yi Ling in the coffin. Her face was haggard. Auntie, have something to eat. Yun Mingyao brought a bowl of bird's nest porridge and called out to Mother Yi softly. Mother, you haven't eaten for 3 days. Eat something. Looking at Mother Ye's haggard face, Yi Ping couldn't bear to see it. Qiuyun Ling body has been here for a month. Why don't we bury her? Yi Tsong Hao persuaded Mother Yi with a complicated expression. No. No. Mother Ye's eyes were filled with tears. She seemed to be in a daze. She choked and said, Ling won't die. She won't die. I have to wait for Xian to come back. He will definitely save Ling Qiuyun, the dead can't be brought back to life. You sigh. Yi Songhai sighed and couldn't continue speaking. Rumble. All of a sudden, it was as if the mountains and rivers had collapsed, as if the stars had fallen. The sky outside completely darkened. Endless lightning intertwined in the clouds, and an extremely terrifying explosion reverberated in all directions. Boundless hostility and murderous intent filled the sky. A blood-red meteor swooped down from the sky. Following the explosion, the entire Yi family ancestral home shook violently. It also made the faces of everyone in the inner hall change. They didn't know what had happened. Dong, dong, dong. Every step was like a mountain or a river. Murderous intent filled the sky. Yi Xian walked slowly, and a mournful bloody light surrounded his body. When he stepped into the Yi family's inner hall and saw Yi Ling-er in the crystal coffin, he stopped in his tracks. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.